Chapter 931. Enough! Let them do as they please. As Wang Chong and Cheng Qianli were continuing to press their advantage, Gao Xianji's voice stopped them. His eyes were fixed forward, and his voice was tinged with a unique ripple of emotion. Wang Chong raised his head and followed Gao Xianji's gaze. He immediately saw two majestic figures riding atop two divine steeds in the middle of the vast Arab army, towering over the Arabs like a vast ocean. Even the hundreds of thousands of Arab cavalry around them could not suppress their sharpness. The two of them didn't attack. They simply stood there quietly, and yet two enormous streams of essence energy exploded out from them, piercing through heaven and earth. Even at this distance, Wang Chong could sense the boundless energy exuding from their bodies. Moreover, they were even stronger than his god King Yama. Abu Muslim. This thought flitted through Wang Chong's mind as he gazed at that stalwart Arab commander in the black cloak, his entire body exuding a steely aura. Wang Chong had never seen Abu Muslim before, but the moment he saw him, Wang Chong immediately recognized him. Abu Muslim's eyes were cold, valiant, and devoid of emotion. They were like cold steel, and his aura was like the undulating tide, vast and boundless. Wang Chong felt that he was even stronger than the celestial wolf Great General Wuxia, one of the top 3 experts of the Western Turkic Khaganate. At this moment, Wang Chong suddenly understood why Gao Xianji, the Western region's war god of Gao Xianji, had been so heavily injured upon his arrival at Talas that even his armor had been shattered. This person was extremely powerful, even stronger than Gao Xianji. Next to him is Arab Vice-Governor Ziad. Abu Muslim and him are both extremely powerful. If we continue to advance, Abu Muslim and Ziad will have to enter the field. In our current situation, both sides will be heavily injured, and we won't have much of an advantage. If Huishu Wuzong and the others return at this time, they will really fall into an extremely passive situation. Gao Xianji said. When speaking of Abu Muslim, Gao Xianji's voice was tinged with extreme apprehension. It was obvious that Gao Xianji viewed this Arab governor, whom he had been fighting with for the last 2 months, as a formidable foe. The entire battlefield was silent, with only the sound of both armies retreating like the tide. Wang Chong's group and the 2 highest Arab commanders stared at each other from a distance, all of them silently restraining themselves. Daluan Ruozan, what's going on? Why did they give the order to retreat at this time? If I had a little more time, I might have been able to kill that brat for you. At the same time, as the vast sea of Arab soldiers retreated, Wuxia rode his Turkic steed back to the hills behind the battlefield. At the most intense moment of his battle with Wang Chong, Daluan Ruozan's horn had put an end to it, forcing him to retreat. This left Wuxia very dissatisfied. Great General, don't be in such a rush. Wang Chong is still trapped in Talas. If Great General wishes to fight and kill him, there will still be a chance in the future. But if this battle continues, it will be extremely disadvantageous to us. Daluan Ruozan indifferently said, his expression relaxed and carefree. Wuxia's harsh tone had not the slightest effect on him. Disadvantageous? What disadvantageous? Daluan Ruozan's words finally brought Wuxia to his senses. Daluan Ruozan was a civil minister. His martial arts were not very high, but he had a unique temperament that could calm even the most irascible of people. This was something that only Daluan Ruozan possessed. Even Wuxia had been unwittingly influenced by it. This one can understand that Great General wishes to avenge a good Elan. And this one can also understand that you wish to quell the rage of those 200,000 warhorses for Ishbara Khagan. But now is far from the time to fight to the death with the Tang dynasty. Has Great General forgotten who the main force fighting against the Tang people is? Daluan Ruozan faintly smiled. With a wave of his sleeve, he placed his hands behind his back. His entire being exuded a scholarly and dashing aura that seemed to be able to guide the world. Buzz! Wuxia's mind trembled at these words, and he finally came back to his senses. His eyes, which had been agitated by rage, gradually regained their clarity. Haha! It seems like Great General has already understood. No matter what, we are not the main force fighting against the Tang dynasty. And with our few people, we would never have been able to defeat the Tang dynasty. Has Great General not realized? Even now, the Arabs have not succeeded in breaking through the Tang people's first steel defense line. As Dalawan Ruozan spoke, he waved his sleeve and took 2 steps forward, his gaze fixed on the receding tide of Arab cavalry. In this battle, Huashu Wazong, Dusong Mangpoj, and Dawusili had all been in the center of the battlefield, so they had not been paying attention to the other sides of the battlefield. But Dalawan Ruozan had been overseeing the entire situation, paying attention to all the changes taking place in the various areas of the battlefield. This battle had originally been extremely simple. The Uzan, the Western Turks, and the Arabs had joined forces, relying on their superior numbers and top-class fighting power to utterly crush the Tang dynasty. The Arabs had used their main force of several 100,000 to delay the Tang dynasty, and the Uzan and the Western Turks had supported them from the side. In just a few hours, the battle had ended. But this ordinary and simple battle that didn't require much strategy or tactics had, because of Wang Chong's 2 steel walls and Wang Chong's special tactics, the Arabs had supported the Tang dynasty while the Uzan and the Western Turks had become the main force of the decisive battle. This was a completely different version of Dalawan Ruozan's and Dawusili's plans. You mean that the Arabs are using our strength to wear down the Tang dynasty? Dawusili suddenly said. That's not necessarily true. The Tang dynasty has placed all its heavily armored shieldmen, spearmen, and other defensive forces behind the first steel defense line, so that they can use their main force to deal with us. This has always been the result that they want to create. But we can't rule out the possibility that this is the first time we've allied with the Arabs, and we're still far from having a deep alliance. If we can use our strength to weaken the Tang dynasty, I'm sure that Abu Muslim would be happy to do so. Dalawan Ruozan indifferently said, if the main force of this battle became the Uzan and the Western Turks, he would have completely lost. In the end, the only ones who would benefit would be the Arabs or the Tang dynasty. I understand. Dawusili was quiet for a few moments, the anger on his brow finally beginning to fade. Wang Chong truly needed to be killed, but Dalawan Ruozan's words were not without reason. This battle of Talas was far too special, far different from any battle that Dawusili had experienced in the past. A tiny Talas had gathered far too many great generals, far too many soldiers and far too many factions. Pulling one hair could affect the entire body. This was something that both sides needed to carefully consider. You understand the Tang dynasty better than I do, so I'll leave this battle to you. Dawusili said. From the very beginning, Dalawan Ruozan had finally obtained his approval. Buzz! But at this moment, a massive disturbance came from the western side of Talas. Dalawan Ruozan, Dawusili, Huashu Wazong, and Dusong Mangpoj all turned in that direction. It's him! Dalawan Ruozan's pupils constricted, his mind in shock. Just what is this brat up to? At almost the same time, Dawusili, Huashu Wazong, and the others also noticed that thin figure in front of the first defense line, but brimming with boundless power. Abu Muslim. In front of the first defense line, Wang Chong rode the white-hoofed shadow out of the army and toward Abu Muslim's location, under the shocked and respectful gazes of countless soldiers. Wang Chong had not said this name in the language of the Tang dynasty, but in the somewhat choppy Arabic. His voice immediately attracted the attention of almost all the Arab cavalry in the distance. This was the first time they had heard the name of their own commander from the mouth of the Tang people's commander. Wang Chong! Nearby, Gao Xinji's face flickered as he stared in shock at Wang Chong. He was not proficient in Arabic, but from Wang Chong's pronunciation, he could tell that it was a familiar name. Whether it was Gao Xinji or Cheng Qianli, these 2 commanders of the Anqi Protectorate Army, none of them knew what Wang Chong wanted to do by walking out at a time like this. Wang Chong did not turn his head, only made a reassuring gesture with his back to the pair. In the distance, the retreating Arab army was in an uproar. Abu Muslim and Ziyad stood side by side, their steely eyes showing a hint of emotion for the first time. It was not common for a Tang dynasty commander to be able to speak Arabic. The Abbasid Caliphate's governor of the East, Abu Muslim, is here. Who is speaking on the other side? Report your name. Abu Muslim lightly patted his black Sasanian steed as he slowly rode against the retreating army. His speed was neither fast nor slow, but it exuded an extremely powerful aura. It was like an enormous mountain was slowly moving toward them. Everyone who saw his body would feel a powerful, ocean-like pressure pouncing on them. Empire of the Tang Dynasty, Qixi Protector General Wang Chong. Wang Chong's eyes flashed as his body exploded with a powerful aura. Even though he had not reached Abu Muslim's level, Wang Chong's aura was as vast as the sun, moon, and stars in the sky, not one bit inferior to Abu Muslim's. At this moment, Wang Chong had finally exploded with the aura of the war saint of the Central Plains. One was the strongest war saint of the Central Plains, while the other was the most iron-fisted governor of the West. The most outstanding and important figures of the empires of the East and West were like meteors crashing into the earth, meeting for the first time in this tiny city of Talas. Chapter 932. Wang Chong. A glimmer of light flashed through Abu Muslim's eyes, but his chiseled face, brimming with blood and callousness, did not show much emotion. Speak, Tang people. What do you want to do? As he spoke, he stared straight at Wang Chong. His body did not make any movements, but a powerful aura erupted from him. As the governor of the east of the Arabian Empire, he was the most powerful existence east of Khorasan. Other than the caliph, he was the most influential person in the east. Countless empires in the east have been flattened by his horse, and countless generals of Arabia followed his lead. In the entire world, there were very few people that a general of Abu Muslim's level cared about. In the entire Tang dynasty, only Anqi Protector General Gao Xianji was worthy of his attention. Everyone else was nothing to worry about. Abu Muslim would never speak to anyone on the front lines, and he had only responded to Wang Chong because Wang Chong, a Tang people, could speak the noble Arabian language. This was already an additional favor. Abu Muslim, as the Qixi Protector General of the Tang dynasty, I will give you one final warning. Wang Chong's resounding voice resounded over the battlefield, his expression solemn and serene. His aura was like an unsheathed sword, so sharp that no powerful existence could ignore him. Take your army and leave this place. No matter how many countries Arabia has conquered, the last thing you should do is encroach on the western regions and make an enemy of the Tang dynasty. The battlefield was eerily still, with only Wang Chong's booming voice echoing through the air. At this moment, even Gao Xianji and Cheng Qianli were silent. Tang people, this is impossible. Abu Muslim's reply was concise and decisive. No country on this continent can stop the iron hooves of Arabia from conquering, not even the Tang dynasty. Abu Muslim's reply was as cold as steel. All was quiet. Although many people didn't understand Arabic, they could still understand a great deal from Abu Muslim's cold and hard face. The atmosphere suddenly became more and more tense. Heh! Hearing Abu Muslim's words, Wang Chong suddenly laughed. Clang! In an instant, everyone heard a sword cry that was clear and melodious like a dragon. As the Arabs, the Tang dynasty, and even the distant Uzan and the Western Turks watched, Wang Chong unsheathed his sword, the cold and dazzling Wuxia steel sword covered in flowing water, and pointed it at the heavens, its radiance reflecting off of it. If that's the case, then listen carefully to every word I'm about to say. This war is far from the end, but only the beginning. The locations of its conquests are not limited to Talas, or the western regions. Starting from this moment, with Talas as the starting point, all of Samarkand, Khorasan in the rear, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, Baghdad, and the distant west will all be within the scope of this war. This is not just a war between you and me, nor is it just a war in the western regions, but a war between the empires of the east and the west. Starting from this moment, no matter what, if Arabia cannot conquer the Tang dynasty will conquer the Tang dynasty. All Arabia will speak the language of the Tang people, and all of Arabia will submit to the rule of the Tang dynasty. Li Sai, please repeat what I just said in the language of the Tang dynasty. Boom! The first to react to Wang Chong's words were the Arab army, and all of them fell into an uproar. Then, when Li Sai repeated Wang Chong's words in the language of the Tang people, even the distant Daluan Ruozan, De Wusili, Huashu Wizong, and Daluan Ruozan paled. This scoundrel, he really dares to speak. A strange look flitted through Dewissely's eyes. The Turks were a nomadic people whose footprints had spread throughout the western regions, even to Arabia and Carrick's Spazinu. He was deeply aware of just how powerful an empire Arabia was. If not for this, he would not have brought 40,000 soldiers with him. It was precisely because he was well aware that not even a celestial wolf great general like Dewissely dared to lightly say such words. I'm afraid that he's not just talking, Dalawan Ruozan indifferently said, a strange light in his eyes, but he said no more. In the entire world, if anyone said such words, the Arabs would not need to care. Only that youth, no one could ignore his words. Just like in the Southwest back then, no one could believe that a teenager, leading several thousand soldiers, had managed to change the outcome of a clearly lost battle, defeating the 400,000 soldiers under his command. This 17-year-old protector general had never been just talking. In the distance, Wang Chong paid no attention to the reactions of the crowd. With these final words, Wang Chong immediately turned his horse around and began to slowly make his way back to his camp. You're too arrogant. Abu Muslim finally spoke in the middle of the army. The first sentence that came out of his mouth shocked everyone, because he was speaking the language of the Tang dynasty. How could this be? At this moment, even Gao Xianji and Cheng Qianli were dumbfounded. The two of them had battled with Abu Muslim for so long, but this was the first time they had heard that Abu Muslim could speak the language of the Tang dynasty. But after a moment's thought, their hearts sank. Arabia and the Tang dynasty were two completely different countries, and the two countries had not had much interaction before this. Abu Muslim was a pure soldier, the Abbasid Caliphate's governor of the East, so there was no need for him to learn the language of the Tang dynasty. It was clear that Abu Muslim had long since harbored ambitions for the Tang dynasty. In the crowd, Wang Chong stopped, but he did not turn his head. Tang people, you have no idea just how ignorant and foolish your words were. Abu Muslim stared at Wang Chong's back, his face twisted into a nasty grimace. Wang Chong's words had thoroughly infuriated him. This was the first time in the history of Arabia that a great general of an enemy state had threatened to conquer all of Arabia. In our Arabian Empire, there is a saying, even though knowledge is far away in China, it should still be sought after. If you knew just how powerful the true Arabia is, you would not have said such arrogant and ignorant words. Do you see the vast army behind me? The army that you've been fighting with for several months is just one of the armies of the empire in the east. What you see is only the tip of the iceberg. There are at least 1 million more armies like this in the empire. Abu Muslim slowly spread open his arms, his entire body exploding with a tidal wave of energy that caused the surrounding space to twist and distort, black spatial fissures appearing in the air. Tang people, you will pay a price for those words you said just now. Not just you, but the entire Tang dynasty. Then let's fight. Wang Chong only faintly smiled. As you wish. At Wang Chong's words, Abu Muslim's expression finally turned gloomy and cold. Turning his horse around, he began to gallop toward the western side of the city of Talas. Retreat! With a wave of Abu Muslim's arm, the tens of thousands of Arab cavalry immediately retreated like the receding tide. With this, the second day of battle came to an end. In the future, the Arabs won't rest until they're dead. The galloping of hooves could be heard as Gao Xianji and Cheng Qianli slowly rode out from the rear on his divine steed bestowed by the emperor. As they looked at Wang Chong, the two of them were filled with admiration. The more they interacted with Wang Chong, the deeper their understanding of him became, and the more they sensed the charm hidden within his body. Hasn't it always been like this? Wang Chong faintly smiled. The Tang dynasty has never lacked for opponents, nor has it lacked for Arabia. No one has been able to defeat us in the past, and no one in the present or in the future will be able to defeat my Tang dynasty. That's right. No one can defeat the Tang dynasty. Gao Xianji and Cheng Qianli glanced at Wang Chong in surprise, and then the three of them smiled at each other. Retreat! With this order, the army retreated to the two steel defense lines, officially ending the battle. The battlefield was littered with corpses of humans, horses, wolves, and vultures. The air was thick with the pungent stench of blood. from the time the sun rose to noon. Although the battle had ended, the cleanup work after the battle was far from over. Zhang Ke, have you calculated the casualties? Outside Talas, Wang Chong held his hands behind his back as he spoke without turning his head. Replying to Marquis, the statistics have been completed. In the last 2 days of battle, we lost more than 30,000 men, and another 10,000 were wounded. The vast majority of the casualties were the mercenaries of the western regions. Our equipment was better, so our losses were not very high. Zhang Ke's voice came from behind him, his back bowed and his expression respectful. In other words, we only have around 100,000 soldiers left. Wang Chong slightly creased his brow. Yes. Then what about the losses of the Western Turks, Uzin and Arabs? Wang Chong asked. We don't have a concrete count, but based on the estimates of the scouts, the Western Turks and Uzin lost around 40,000 elites and nearly 30,000 wolf corpses. The giant wolves brought by the Western Turks had a major impact on our attacks. Many of the ballista bolts were blocked by these wolf corpses, and the cavalry had to prioritize dealing with these Turkic wolves. As for the Arabs, they lost nearly 80,000 soldiers yesterday. Today, our main force was focused on dealing with the Western Turks and Uzin, while the Arabs focused on defense. But even so, Chen Bin's ballista army and General Wang Yan's infantry had managed to kill a large number of Arabs, more than 30,000 of them. In addition, a large number of people are injured. I estimate the number to be close to 40,000. Zhang Ke sincerely said. Wang Chong fell silent at Zhang Ke's words. Both Dalawan Ruozin and Abu Muslim had made ample preparations for this battle. The enormous number of giant wolves Dawusili had brought, the Arab Iron Beast army, and the hundreds of catapults had not been able to inflict as much damage as Wang Chong's ballista army had expected. Understood. Pass on my order. All the wounded are to be bandaged and moved into Talas to recover. In addition, call Sir Zhang over. Yes, Marquis. Zhang Ke quickly departed. Chapter 933. Marquis, you were looking for me? Zhang Shouji respectfully bowed in front of Wang Chong. In the 2 days of battle, the busiest member of the Tang army had been Zhang Shouji. In the 2 days of battle, the busiest member of the Tang army had been Zhang Shouji. As the highest civil engineer of Talas, and one of the most formidable civil engineers of the Tang dynasty, Zhang Shouji had personally built the 2 steel defense lines and the several hundred steel catapults on the walls of Talas. From the southwest to the northwest, Zhang Shouji's role was only getting more and more important. One could say that, though he didn't know any martial arts, in all of Qixi, his importance was probably second only to Wang Chong. This is for you. Modify and strengthen the 2 defense lines. As Wang Chong spoke, he took out a blueprint and handed it over. This was a blueprint that he had redesigned after the conclusion of the battle, based on the current situation and the characteristics of the 3 sides. Other than Wang Chong, Zhang Shouji, and a few of his core disciples, no one else could understand these blueprints. Relax. Leave this matter to me. Zhang Shouji glanced at the blueprint and quickly nodded. The situation was urgent, and the lives of more than 100,000 soldiers were at stake. Zhang Shouji did not dare to tarry. He took the blueprint and hurriedly left. Li Sai, I'll leave the matters here to you. Strengthen the defenses and keep an eye on the movements of Uzin, the Western Turks and the Arabs. If anything happens, inform me at any time. Once Zhang Shouji had left, Wang Chong continued to issue orders. This general will go. Li Sai sternly said. Suki Chenbin, hurry up and repair the ballistae. Prepare for battle at any moment. Yes, Marquis, the pair loudly replied. After taking care of everything, Wang Chong passed through the gates of Talas with a wave of his sleeve. Talas had sentries every few steps and all kinds of military fortresses, bazaars and halls, all constructed of massive stone. Although it was not as luxurious or beautiful as the Great Tang of the Central Plains, it had its own grandeur. Moreover, from the layout of the city, one could faintly see that this strategic economic and military center on the Silk Road of the Western regions had once been a prosperous city. Lord Protector General, this way please. My lord and General Wang are already waiting inside. Upon seeing Wang Chong, an officer of the Anqi Protectorate Army respectfully greeted him. Wang Chong nodded. Lead the way. After passing through the corridors, Wang Chong saw the armored Gao Xianji in the main hall of Talas. At his side were Cheng Qianli, Shi Yuanqing, Wang Chong's father Wang Yan, his big brother Wang Fu, and the new Karluk chiefs Guli and Ferdinand. The moment they saw Wang Chong enter, everyone turned to look at him. Haha, Wang Chong, you've come. We were in the middle of our calculations, and everyone else is here except for you. Gao Xianji had been in the middle of a discussion with his generals, but when he saw Wang Chong, he immediately walked around the model of Talas and went to welcome him, a relaxed smile on his lips. The others didn't react when they saw this scene, but a brown-bearded man with a powerful aura beside Cheng Qianli had a shocked expression on his face. Gao Xianji had a proud personality, and in the western regions, he was known as the Anqi war god. All the tribal chiefs had to lower their heads in front of Gao Xianji. He had followed Gao Xianji for 10-some years, but he had never seen him so courteous to anyone. No, this was no longer just being courteous. From the fact that Gao Xianji was willing to personally welcome that young man in front of everyone, it was clear that in his heart, that young man's status and importance was enough to be on equal footing with him, an existence that Gao Xianji viewed as an equal. I've kept you waiting. Wang Chong paid no attention to anything else. After returning a bow to Gao Xianji and exchanging some pleasantries, he strode up to the model of Talas in the center of the hall and began to examine it. This model was completely different from the one Wang Chong had used in Qixi. The details were much more detailed and complete. Building a model was a basic ability of a general. Sometimes, it was possible to see through a sandbox and see a general's abilities. The Anqi Protectorate Army's battle model has been meticulously planned out, from the terrain around Talas, the hills and valleys, to the small ravines and ravines of the battlefield. Everything has been taken into account. From this point of view, Gao Xianji truly lives up to his reputation as the wall of the Tang dynasty, the Anqi war god. Wang Chong pensively gazed at the model. My lord, I'm too polite. As Wang Chong was examining the model, he suddenly heard a soft voice in his ear. This voice was coarse and thick, and it was heavily accented, clearly belonging to the Hu. Wang Chong turned his head, and immediately saw a boorish face with a particularly striking brown beard. Wang Chong said nothing, only gave him a questioning look. This one is the leader of the Ferdinand Banahan, paying respects to Lord Protector General. In the future, when Lord Protector General has the time, I hope that you will come to our Ferdinand for a chat. Banahan will definitely be waiting for you. Banahan gave a slight bow, an extremely respectful expression on his face. It's him. Wang Chong hadn't paid much attention at the start, but upon hearing the name Ferdinand, a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Only with Wanha Paluo and the Karluks as the vanguard could the loyalty of an ally of the Tang dynasty be even more apparent. In the entire history of the Tang dynasty, Ferdinand and Banahan were extremely rare, loyal allies of the Tang dynasty. Whether in times of triumph or defeat, they would remain unswervingly loyal to the Tang dynasty. Even after the defeat at Talas, they had not wavered in the slightest. In a place like the western regions, where the culture of the Central Plains was uncivilized, and the countries liked to sway left and right, this was an extremely rare and precious trait. Wang Chong instantly had a good impression of him. Kagan is too polite. Wang Chong faintly smiled, a thought emerging in his mind. Since this is our first meeting, this one just happens to have a gift for Kagan. Oh, Banahan's curiosity was piqued when he heard these words. I heard that the Khan has a great flame crow technique, which is a secret technique passed down in the palace. But because of its long history, coupled with the internal strife of the palace and various other reasons, the technique is incomplete, so it is difficult for the Khan to make further progress. I have an incantation that may be able to help the Khan complete the Great Flame Crow technique, and help the Khan break through the bottleneck and reach a higher level. Wang Chong smiled. Lord Protector General, is this true? Banahan's eyes widened at these words, his face filled with pleasant surprise, not daring to believe his ears. There was such a thing. At this moment, even Gao Xianji couldn't help but lean over. Wang Chong silently smiled. There was truly no need to doubt the Farahan's loyalty, but as the chief of the Farahan tribe, Banahan's strength was not very famous in the western regions. Even Wanha Pelua was firmly above him. This could only be described as a pity. Wang Chong had read a few records, so he knew that the crux of the problem lay in the legendary Great Fire Crow art of the Farahan tribe. This legendary art had become incomplete due to a famous internal conflict within the Farahan tribe, resulting in the Farahan Khagan's accomplishments being extremely limited. This problem persisted until the future Great Calamity arrived, when all of the martial arts were gathered and mutually verified. Only after everyone's wisdom and experience were gathered was this problem solved. Wang Chong had only suddenly remembered this point when he saw Banahan's Farahan Khagan Banahan. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we try, Wang Chong said. Calling over a guard, Wang Chong brought over a brush, ink and paper. He quickly wrote down the mnemonic for the Great Fire Crow art on paper and gave it to Ferganan. Banahan treated it like a precious treasure. After this small interlude, everyone turned their attention back to the sand table. Although we've won the battles of the last 2 days, we still can't let our guard down. The first to speak was Cheng Qianli. As the Vice Protector General of the Anqi Protectorate Army, Cheng Qianli had a great deal of authority on the battlefield. Dalawan Ruozan still hasn't retreated, and Abu Muslim still has his main force. Most importantly, he still hasn't personally entered the field. We don't know how many moves he has up his sleeves, or how many soldiers he has in reserve. The word soldiers in reserve instantly caused the mood in the hall to turn heavy. Everyone knew that the Arabs loved to fight, and Talas was too close, allowing them to recruit soldiers from the rear at any time. In truth, the Arabs have been recruiting soldiers this entire time. This was why, in the 2 months that the Anqi Protectorate Army had been fighting with the Arabs, Abu Muslim soldiers had only been increasing, not decreasing. When Wang Chong had arrived at Talas, there were still more than 300,000 soldiers stationed outside the walls. The hall was quiet, but in the end it was Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan, who broke the silence. Although the Arabs have come with a ferocious momentum, and the battlefield is closer to them, numbers are not the only things that matter in war. There is also overall strength, training, cooperation, strategy, tactics, logistics, and all other aspects. From these considerations, I believe that there is no need for everyone to worry too much. The urgent task at hand is to discuss how to deal with the alliance between the Uzan, Western Turks, and Arabs. My opinion is the same as Lord Father's. Abu Muslim has still not retreated. If we don't thoroughly defeat him, this war can't be considered over. Wang Chong's big brother, Wang Fu, also spoke up at this moment. Abu Muslim is not that easy to deal with. I've fought with him for more than 2 months, so I have some understanding of him. He likes to constantly test the waters, using high-intensity attacks to assault his opponents like a tide, until his opponents will crumble, and he strikes fear into their hearts. And even if his opponent doesn't lose, he will gradually grasp your weakness through these constant attacks. In the end, he will personally strike and use his overwhelming advantage to deal a fatal blow to finish off his opponent. Gao Xianji suddenly interrupted. His expression was solemn, and there was a hint of warning in it. Moreover, the Arabs worship battle, no matter how many people they lose. As long as Abu Muslim does not give the order to retreat, they will never retreat, much less give up. To the Arabs, as long as they can defeat their opponents and conquer their country, they don't care about the price. In this aspect, they are completely different from the other opponents of the Tang dynasty. Chapter 934. In truth, I feel that the Tang dynasty is no weaker than the Arabs in terms of fighting power. Lord Gao Xianji only has 70,000 soldiers, but he was able to hold back the Arabs at Talas for more than 2 months. Not even Abu Muslim was able to do anything. To the best of our Ferganians' understanding of the Arabs, this sort of war has never been fought before. And there's also this, my lord. In yesterday's 2 battles, although the Arabs had the absolute advantage in numbers, and even gained a new ally, They were still no match for this milord. In these two battles, more than 100,000 people died, while the Tang dynasty's losses were extremely limited. If this news were to get out, the countries conquered by Arabia would find it hard to imagine. Of all the countries on the continent, probably only the Tang dynasty can defeat the Arabs. In the eyes of us mercenaries, the Tang dynasty is the strongest country, which is why we are willing to fight alongside the Tang dynasty. The Ferganan chief Banahan suddenly spoke, his expression one of utmost sincerity. The Anchi Protectorate army had always had two major allies, the Karluks and the Ferganans. The Karluk leader Wanha Pelua was dead, so the only mercenary who could speak to Gao Xinji was Banahan. Banahan's words surprised everyone in the hall. No one had expected that this Ferganan chief would have such a strong faith in the Tang dynasty. The heavy mood in the hall instantly vanished, and even Wang Chong couldn't help but smile. The Ferganans truly were the most loyal allies of the Tang dynasty. But we're currently surrounded by enemies. No matter which side we attack, we'll be attacked by the other side. If we don't resolve this problem, we'll still lose. At this moment, a voice suddenly interrupted. Before his voice faded away, the atmosphere that was eased by Banahan instantly vanished. Everyone's gazes turned to look at Gu Li, who was deep in thought beside the sand table, unaware of the changes in his surroundings. Perhaps it was because the surroundings were unusually quiet, but Gu Li finally sensed something. He raised his head and realized that he had misspoken. His expression changed immediately. The Karluks had colluded with Arabia, and now that Wanha Peluo had been exposed and killed, the Karluks were in a crisis of trust. If they were to do anything out of line at this time and anger the Tang dynasty, the Karluks would truly be unable to recover from this setback. Guli is correct. Being attacked from the front and rear is a major taboo in the art of war. If we don't resolve this problem, we'll find it very difficult to concentrate on dealing with the Arabs. Just as Guli was feeling uneasy and full of despair, a sonorous voice suddenly rang out in the hall. Wang Chong suddenly spoke. Lord Protector General. At this moment, Guli felt like he had found a life-saving straw, and his entire body instantly calmed down. Those who didn't know Wang Chong's background would only see that he was 16 or 17. But those with some understanding would know that this young Protector General's status in Talas was not one bit inferior to Gao Xianji's, perhaps even higher. After all, he was the commander of the more than 100,000 soldiers outside the city. But this matter isn't too difficult to resolve. Although Abu Muslim can get an endless stream of soldiers from the Arabs, the same can't be said for the other side. As Wang Chong spoke, his eyes were as firm and unwavering as a boulder. It was like there was no difficulty in the world that could defeat him, and anyone who saw his eyes would be infected and filled with confidence in him. Uzun and the Western Turks have a total of 120,000 soldiers. In the first battle, they've already lost more than 40,000 soldiers, leaving only around 70,000. From now on, Daluan Ruozan will be extremely cautious. He won't take as many risks as he did before. With every soldier he loses a soldier. And if I remember correctly, the Mutri Great Cavalry are the force guarding the royal capital of Uzun. Nothing has happened to the royal capital, but the Mutri Great Cavalry have appeared in Talas. If my guess is correct, this is an army that Daluan Ruozan has privately gathered against the will of the Tsimpo. It's impossible for him to recruit any more reinforcements from Uzun. Buzz. Everyone was stunned by Wang Chong's words. Even Gao Xianji's eyes widened, a pensive look on his face. In this war, many people were only paying attention to what was going on, not what was going on outside the war. Even Gao Xianji was no exception. The Anchi Protectorate army had far too many matters that required his attention. It wasn't that he couldn't sense it, but Wang Chong was far more sensitive to strategic considerations than any of the other commanders here, including himself. You mean to say that this is a war started by one person? Gao Xianji said, a pensive look on his face. I can't be wrong, Wang Chong indifferently said, his profound gaze seemingly able to see through everything. Daluan Ruozan and Huashu Wazong were defeated in the southwest, and Dusong Mangpoj was defeated at the Triangular Gap. The three of them had lost almost all of their troops. No matter how open-minded the Tsimpo is, he would never send more soldiers to them in such a short time. Moreover, if it really was the Tsimpo's idea, it's definitely not just 70,000 soldiers. In addition, although Wuxia is known as the Celestial Wolf Great General and possesses great strength, he only has 40,000 soldiers under his command. But he only had 40,000 men under his command. The rest were the giant wolves that the Western Turks had brought from the steppe. I believe that Ishbara Khagan's probing has already made his intentions clear. The Western Turkic Khaganate won't send any reinforcements. The one with the most calculations in the temple would win while the one with the least would lose. As a great general, one not only had to consider what was in front of them and what they could see on the battlefield, they also had to calculate what they could not see on the battlefield. This included logistics, soldiers, supplies, politics, and so on. In this battle, Wang Chong was not only paying attention to the battlefield, but also to those outside. Whether Dalawan Ruozhen was willing or not, Wang Chong had already obtained what he wanted from this battle. In this battle, Dalawan Ruozhen had staked everything on one throw. His situation was far from being as glorious as it seemed. In a few sentences, Wang Chong had clearly analyzed the situation they were facing. For a moment, the hall was eerily silent, all of them having pensive looks on their faces. Wang Chong's explanation of the complicated situation, one that was extremely disadvantageous to them, gradually became clear in everyone's minds. As for Arabia, although Talas is closer to Arabia, don't forget that we are not fighting alone. Standing behind us is the entire Tang dynasty. As long as we can hold out for a while, our reinforcements will continue to come. In this aspect, we are completely different from the Western Turks and the Arabs. Wang Chong's voice was resounding and resounding. The moment Wang Chong spoke, the mood in the hall relaxed, and Banahan and Guli felt energized. It was true that Abu Muslim was backed by the massive Arabian Empire, but the Anshi Protectorate army was also backed by the massive Tang dynasty. The power of the Tang dynasty was renowned throughout the western regions. This was also why so many mercenary tribes of the western regions were willing to fight alongside the Tang dynasty against Arabia. Lord Protector General speaks the truth. I am confident that no matter what, the Tang dynasty will win in the end. Our Karluk tribe will pledge our lives to follow. Guli gave Wang Chong a grateful glance and seized the opportunity to express his loyalty. If not for Wang Chong's words just now, he would have become the target of everyone's criticism. Guli was gradually gaining more and more admiration for this new Chishi Protector General. Okay, we can talk about these things later. Let's first discuss tonight's problem. If everything goes according to plan, Abu Muslim and Dalawan Ruozhen will definitely move tonight. Wang Chong's eyes quickly focused on the model in the center of the hall. Guli froze for a moment, then asked in confusion, "My lord, we're not fighting in the afternoon." Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, and Qing Qianli immediately began to laugh. Although Guli had succeeded Wan Hapeluo as the new leader of the Karluk tribe, he was still very lacking in terms of military experience and strategy. Relax. If Abu Muslim planned to fight in the afternoon, he wouldn't have retreated in the morning. Wang Chong waved his hand and faintly smiled. In addition, he'll need to clean up the aftermath of the battle. He can't possibly start 2 battles in such a short time. Even if he's willing, Dalawan Ruozhen will never agree. All his energy will be focused on the night raid. After losing a battle during the day, all generals would consider attacking at night. This was because compared to the day, there were more advantages at night. For example, the opponent would not be constantly alert. The more intense the battle during the day, the more sleepy they would be at night. Moreover, the cover of the night would make it easier for the army to approach the enemy, and at the same time, it would greatly weaken the power of the archers and ballistae, making it even harder for them to aim. This truly is the case. Based on my understanding of Abu Muslim, he's an extremely aggressive person who will never let go of a chance at night. In addition, Dalawan Ruozhen will definitely be prepared, so the risk at night is no less than that of the day. But this is also an opportunity for us. Anshi Protector General Gao Xianji also spoke up at this moment. All is fair in war. Although we don't have as many soldiers as the Arabs, the Western Turks, or the Uzan, we have two major advantages: the steel walls and the city of Talas, which Abu Muslim doesn't have. The Arabs can attack us at night, but we can do the same to them. In addition, we can use this opportunity to gather some information. A faint smile appeared on Wang Chong's lips at these words. Many people knew that Gao Xianji was a godly strategist, that his attacks were swift and fierce, and that he would often appear in places his enemies would not expect. But few people knew that Gao Xianji had another trait. All was fair in war. He had used this move to conquer countless countries in the western regions. Chapter 935. I've exchanged blows with Daluan Ruozan. Based on my understanding of him, they're probably already discussing tonight's operation. If my guess is correct, their target tonight should be here. As Wang Chong spoke, he suddenly extended a finger and pointed at a point on the model. This finger instantly attracted the attention of everyone in the hall, countless gazes turning to the point Wang Chong was pointing at. The day part of our war with the Tang dynasty has ended, but the night part is still far from beginning. Meanwhile, on the eastern side of the battlefield of Talas, behind the high hills, in a typical Western Turkic golden tent, Daluan Ruozan, Dawusili, Huashu Wizang, Dusong Mangpoj, and the other Western Turkic and Uzan commanders were gathered around Daluan Ruozan. Unlike Wang Chong and the others, they were not facing a model of Talas, but the precious map of the Uzan Empire. On the surface, the leader of the Tang dynasty is Gao Xianji, but in reality, the commander behind the scenes is that youngest son of the Wang clan that we're familiar with. Based on my understanding of him, he'll definitely make his move tonight. In the southwest, he already used this move. This time, he definitely won't let go of this opportunity. Just as Wang Chong had made the same judgment about Daluan Ruozan was making the same judgment about Wang Chong. These two old foes understood each other far too well. In addition, in the battle during the day, we've already lost many soldiers. Unlike the Tang dynasty, we don't have Tang Li to replenish our forces, so I'm sure that Wang Chong will make us the focus of his attacks in the future. He will continue to use all effective methods to nibble away at our forces, bit by bit, until we are completely exhausted. If Wang Chong were here, he would definitely be shocked, because Daluan Ruozan had accurately described the strategy he had analyzed to the crowd in the Lord's Hall of Talas. Gong Ju Jeb, how are the fences and outposts I ordered you to build going? Daluan Ruozan turned his head and looked at an Uzan commander behind him. Replying to Prime Minister, we have already unloaded the goods from the accompanying vehicles and ordered the soldiers to start the construction. It should be completed in about 4 hours. His name was Ganju Jebu, and he had a rough face and a scimitar hanging from his waist. He looked extremely sturdy, and he was an Uzan general. Very good. Instruct all the soldiers to arrange the signal for patrol. In addition, try to light a large number of torches outside the defensive line. Anyone who approaches, be it the enemy or their own people, must be strictly guarded. If you run into your own people, you must be more vigilant than if you run into an enemy. Daluan Ruozan said, Isn't Prime Minister making a mountain out of a molehill? Isn't it a little too cautious to pass by at night? At this moment a voice rang out in the tent. Dawusili had his hands behind his back. At the beginning, he had been listening silently, but as he listened his wild, thick brows gradually furrowed. Daluan Ruozan was Uzan's Prime Minister. After a brief interaction, Dawusili had deeply acknowledged this fact. But Daluan Ruozan's solemn appearance, as if he was facing a great enemy, was something that Dawusili found hard to agree with. Perhaps not even Daluan Ruozan had been like this in the early morning battle. Haha, Supreme General has never dealt with that person, so it's normal that you don't know. That person's art of war is different from anyone else's. In the War of the Southwest, that person even used the tactic of having the Tang people disguise themselves as our Uzan and Mengshi Zhao people several times. It was raining at the time, so he ruined our encirclement several times. What should have been an absolute advantage was slowly destroyed by him, leading to our final defeat. Daluan Ruozan, on the other hand, faintly smiled, not angry. Buzz. Hearing Daluan Ruozen's words, Dawusili, Shamshak, Chekimbenba, and the other Turkic Khaganate generals all grimaced. They knew a little about the War of the Southwest, but they had never heard of such specific details. That's too despicable. Chekimbenba viciously said. The Western Turks were used to a head-on clash of swords and spears. If the enemy disguised themselves as Western Turks and launched a sneak attack, it would truly be impossible to defend against. Great General, please do not blame me. Prime Minister is just being a little cautious, and there's nothing wrong with being careful. I say this out of consideration for the entire army. Moreover, the battlefield is littered with corpses. The Tang dynasty has probably already taken measures to remove the armor from those corpses. In total, we lost nearly 40,000 men in this battle. If the Tang dynasty sends 40,000 men disguised as us to launch a sneak attack in the darkness, we simply won't be able to hold out, and will suffer grievous losses. Huashu Wuzong sternly said. Both Daluan Ruozen and Huashu Wuzong were well aware of Wang Chong's habit of pretending to be his opponents, and were extremely wary of it. Dawusili might not understand, but Daluan Ruozen and Huashu Wuzong could not possibly not be on guard. Dawusili said nothing, but his brows creased. A small number of disguised soldiers wouldn't be a problem, but a large number was a different matter. If that brat from the Tang dynasty really was so crafty, they truly would have to be on guard. We'll do as you say. I will have my subordinates do their best to cooperate. But if the Tang dynasty can ambush us, why can't we attack them? Rather than sitting around and waiting for death, it's better to attack instead of defending. Dawusili sternly said. Haha, I agree with the great general on this point. Daluan Ruozen faintly smiled and lightly waved his sleeve. Turning his eyes back to the map of the continent on the hollowed-out table in the tent. Although the Tang dynasty is powerful and skilled in the art of war, more than half of them are mercenaries. The true Tang dynasty doesn't have many soldiers. Besides that, they also have a massive weakness. If we can grasp this weakness, we can cut off an arm. Even if the Tang dynasty still has 100,000 soldiers, there's nothing to fear. What weakness? Daluan Ruozen's words immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the tent. Dawusili, Huaba Senji, Chekimbenba, and Shamshak all turned to look. Ballisti. Daluan Ruozen faintly smiled as he spat out these two words. Ballisti. Daluan Ruozen had no idea that in the Lord Hall of the city of Talas, Wang Chong was confidently saying these two words to all his generals. Ballisti are the cornerstone weapons of the Tang dynasty, and the imperial court has always been extremely strict in this aspect. In our 1,000-li raid to reinforce Talas, a significant number of Arabs, Western Turks, and Uzan soldiers died to ballista bolts. As a wise minister, Daluan Ruozen couldn't have missed this point. If Daluan Ruozen launches a night raid, his target will definitely be the ballisti. Wang Chong's words were powerful and resonant. He understood Daluan Ruozen far too well. Unless it was a large-scale battle, a night raid would only be able to inflict very limited damage. Thus, strategic targets were usually chosen for sneak attacks, so Daluan Ruozen would never miss out on this chance. Lord Protector General, ballisti are no small matter. If the Uzan and Western Turks choose ballisti as their targets, should we consider withdrawing the ballisti into Talas to avoid too many losses? Cheng Qianli probed. Ballisti were not unique to Wang Chong. The Anxi Protectorate army was equipped with many ballisti, but ballisti had always played a supporting role. They had never been an independent army like Wang Chong's, and they had never been able to divide up the work. On the battlefield, the power displayed by Wang Chong's ballisti army and the ballisti of the Anxi Protectorate army were like the difference between the heavens and the earth. If Daluan Ruozen chose Wang Chong's ballista army as his target, it would definitely have a massive effect on the army of the Tang dynasty in the city of Talas. However, the ballista army was still an army under Wang Chong's command. Even though Cheng Qianli was the vice protector general of the Anxi Protectorate army, he had no right to interfere. He could only offer suggestions. In the army, overstepping one's authority was a major taboo. There's no need. Wang Chong chuckled unconcerned. The steel defense line needs to be coordinated with the ballista army to intimidate the enemy. Moreover, we can't rule out the possibility that Abu Muslim and Dalawan Ruozan will launch a large-scale attack at night. Only with the ballistae can we launch a timely counterattack. And without the ballistae, how can we lure out Dalawan Ruozan? The eyes of everyone in the hall brightened at these last words. It seems like Lord Protector General already has plans. Gao Xianji stroked his beard as he realized something and smiled at Wang Chong. Preparedness ensures success, and unpreparedness ensures failure. Since we know that Dalawan Ruozan will attack the ballistae, we can't possibly not be on guard. In addition, the Uzan can attack us, and we can attack them. Wang Chong calmly said. Gao Xianji inwardly nodded at Wang Chong's words. Heroes cherished heroes. Although Wang Chong was much younger than him, he was a top-class great general in terms of strategic thinking. Many of his ideas and countermeasures were in line with Gao Xianji's. This was something that Gao Xianji could not sense from any of the other Anxi Protectorate army officers. Lord Protector General and I are of the same mind. Strike first to gain the initiative, and then strike later to restrain the enemy. Attacking is the best way to solve this problem. Gao Xianji's eyes brightened. Gao Xianji had never been a great general who defended cities. Proactively attacking had always been his style, and this was also why Gao Xianji had been so sympathetic to Wang Chong's idea of attacking. However, there is one more thing that Lord Protector General must guard against. Based on what I know, Dalawan Ruozan has exchanged blows with you before, and has a deep understanding of your techniques. Moreover, he has always been an intelligent person, so he must have predicted that you would attack and prepared for it. If Lord Protector General wishes to attack, you must think carefully, Gao Xianji said. Haha, my lord is overthinking things. The art of war is deceitful, and Dalawan Ruozan only knows of my past strategies, not my present ones. The path of a general is based on the local conditions, and it is unpredictable as well as unpredictable. If I don't have a set style, how can my opponent defend against it? No matter how Dalawan Ruozan prepares, it's useless. Chapter 936. Oh, not just Gao Xianji, but all the Anxi generals in the hall brightened at Wang Chong's words. No one had ever heard Wang Chong's theory of war before, and even Gao Xianji found it refreshing, let alone the others. Only Wang Yan and Wang Fu, who had long since grown accustomed to it, showed little reaction. Lord Protector General speaks wisely. Water is impermanent, momentum is impermanent. I didn't think that my lord would be able to comprehend the principles of the art of war from the everyday sights and sounds of nature. Cheng Qianli praised Wang Chong, his heart filled with sincere admiration. Wang Chong's understanding of the art of war was completely different from any of the generals of the Tang dynasty. It was very difficult to believe that a 17-year-old youth could possess such a high level of understanding of the art of war. Vice Protector General's praise is too much. Wang Chong only faintly smiled, not the slightest bit proud, nor was he overly humble. As the publicly acknowledged war saint of the Central Plains, although he had still not recovered his cultivation level, there were very few people in the world who could compare to him in terms of the art of war. Even Dalawan Ruozan was actually imitating the art of war he had used in the Southwestern War. Leave Dalawan Ruozan to me, but there's still Abu Muslim. If Dalawan Ruozan plans to move at night, Abu Muslim will definitely not let go of this chance. Not only that, based on my understanding of Dalawan Ruozan, he will definitely send a letter to Abu Muslim warning him to be careful of us. Wang Chong said, "Leave this matter to me." Gao Xianji took it without hesitation. He had a smile on his face and looked very calm. After all, he's been fighting with Abu Muslim for so long. No matter what he wants to do, the Anxi Protectorate army can make him return empty-handed. In addition, we can use this opportunity to probe the Arabs and understand what they have up their sleeves. As the god of war of the Western region, Gao Xianji had his own pride. Perhaps Gao Xianji was still lacking in strategic planning. But when it came to leading troops into battle, Gao Xianji was not inferior to anyone. The two commanders of the Tang dynasty quickly came to an agreement. Wang Chong would deal with Dalawan Ruozan, while Gao Xianji would deal with Abu Muslim. Following that, the two commander-in-chief of the Tang dynasty, together with the generals in the hall, discussed the specific actions and details for a long time. After the discussion was done, and there were no problems, they quickly made a decision. All that was left was to wait for nightfall. As time slowly passed, the Western Turks, the Arabs, the Uzan, and the Tang dynasty maintained absolute restraint after the battle. At some point the sky had darkened. Ziyad, what did Baghdad say? Hadn't the Caliph already agreed to dispatch the Mamelukes? Why have the Mamelukes that should have appeared a month ago still not appeared? To the west of the city of Talas, in the brightly lit Arab camp, the governor of Iron and Blood, Abu Muslim, was seated on an enormous throne forged from gold and black iron, looking at Deputy Governor Ziyad. Lord Governor, I've already sent letters several times. Based on the news from the rear, it seems like another uprising has broken out in Khorasan. Those rebels have colluded with the Sassanid nobles and are stirring up trouble there. The Caliph places great importance on this matter, so he has sent the Mamelukes to suppress the uprising. Ziyad bowed. Abu Muslim's thick brow imperceptibly creased at these words. The Sassanid dynasty was an empire that Arabia had once conquered, and it was also the strongest foe the Arabian Empire had encountered in its expansion. Khorasan was the eastern territory of the former Sassanid dynasty. Although Arabia had already conquered the Sassanid dynasty, there were still many remnants of the Sassanid dynasty that had escaped, occasionally staging revolts against Arabia. Of these, Khorasan was the fiercest region of resistance. This had always been a sore point for the Caliph, so he had always fiercely suppressed it. When Abu Muslim had become governor of the East, he had also harshly suppressed that region, but he hadn't expected for long before another uprising had broken out. Have we still not captured those Sassanid nobles? Abu Muslim frowned, a sharp light flashing through the depths of his eyes. Not yet. Those fleeing Sassanid nobles are very cautious, and they have a large number of Khorasani helping them. It's very difficult for us to capture them. The Caliph has already sent Governor Hiero to oversee this matter, and Khorasan has been plastered with posters. But as usual, it will be very difficult for us to capture them. In addition, Ziyad hesitated for a moment, then glanced at Abu Muslim. I just received word from the Caliph that His Majesty is extremely dissatisfied with our progress at Talas. Buzz! Ziyad's words immediately silenced the tent, all the Arab officers lowering their heads in an oppressive atmosphere. In Arabia, the Caliph's decree was the decree of God, and no one dared to defy the Caliph. The Caliph had never cared about the losses suffered by the governors in battle, nor did he care about how many of their subordinates had died. The Caliph only cared about the results. The failure to take Talas in more than 2 months had already incurred the Caliph's displeasure. If this situation could not be changed, Abu Muslim would soon be replaced. Before this, many governors of the East had been replaced because of this reason. Talas will be taken. The Tang dynasty will surely be defeated. After some time, when the atmosphere in the tent was so heavy that it was almost suffocating, Abu Muslim finally spoke. His voice was like steel, suffused with an unshakable will. Write a letter for me. Tell the Caliph that Abu Muslim will end this battle in 2 months, and offer up the western territories of the Tang dynasty as a gift to the Caliph. In addition, once the battle is over, I will start a bloody massacre and use the corpses of 100,000 Tang dynasty soldiers to dispel His Majesty's dissatisfaction. After this battle, not a single one of them will return to the Tang dynasty alive. Abu Muslim's words immediately caused the atmosphere in the tent to become strange and scorching. Any warrior of the Arabian Empire who understood the name Abu Muslim would understand what the word bloody butcher signified. Although this was a boundless terror to the enemies of the Arabian Empire, to the Arabs, whose mission was to kill and conquer, this was a source of excitement, stimulating the morale and fighting power of the entire army. Your subordinate will go, Ziyad sincerely said. That's right, there's one more thing. Although His Majesty has temporarily mobilized the Mamelukes to suppress the Sassanid rebel army, His Majesty has already agreed to 2 of Lord Governor's other requests. Those 2 special armies will appear at Talas tomorrow at the latest and await Lord Governor's orders. Okay, At these words, Abu Muslim's eyes exploded with light, and his entire body was invigorated. Ziyad, I leave this matter to you. Tomorrow, we will end this battle once and for all. This general will go. Flap flap. As the group was in the middle of their discussion, there was the flapping of wings. Thish! In the blink of an eye, a nimble and thin azure eagle closed its wings and shot out of the tent toward Abu Muslim, who was seated on his throne of gold and black iron. This abrupt sight instantly attracted everyone's attention. Seated on his throne, Abu Muslim's eyes flashed as he calmly extended a hand. That thin and small green eagle landed lightly on his extended index finger, motionless. Everyone could see a thin piece of snow-white paper on its leg. It's from Uzan. A hint of confusion flashed through Abu Muslim's eyes as he quickly removed the paper from the azure eagle's leg and began to examine it. As Abu Muslim examined it, the tent was quiet. No one spoke, not even Ziyad. Interesting. The Uzan actually sent a letter warning us to be careful of the Tang people's disguises and sneak attacks. After reading the letter, Abu Muslim grinned and carelessly handed the paper to a swarthy Arab general. Although I don't think that anyone can ambush us, the Uzan have good intentions. Nerman, take care of this and reply to them. Your subordinate will go. The Arab general called Nerman sternly said. In addition, the Uzan and the Western Turks hope that we will work together to attack the Tang dynasty at night. This matter is indisputable and in line with the interests of our Arabs. Nerman, gather your subordinates and get ready. Abu Muslim said. This general will go. Nerman excitedly replied, his eyes glimmering with killing intent as he quickly departed. No one in the Eastern Arab army was more adept at night raids than him. This was going to be a grand and bloody banquet. The sky hung low, and this seemed to be the last sunrise and sunset that all of Talas would see before the end of the year. As the sun sank below the horizon, the sky quickly darkened. Several hours later, the sky over Talas had completely darkened. Plush plush plush. As the sky darkened, flames soared into the sky, illuminating the entire city of steel on the eastern front. Everything within a radius of 50 zhang was illuminated. Soon after, the other city of steel on the western front began to spit fire into the sky. Two long streaks of fire pushed the warning line around the two steel defense lines forward. At almost the same time, in the hills to the east, massive bonfires soared into the sky, their light even brighter and brighter than the two steel walls. These blazing bonfires created a wide defensive perimeter for the Uzan and the Western Turks. And right behind them were the Arabs of the West. One blaze after another, blazing and dazzling, illuminated the ice-cold city of Talas like a resplendent night sky. Three forces for empires. In the instant that night fell, they simultaneously made full preparations. Dalwan Ruozan really did come prepared. Standing on the northeast corner of the city of Talas, Wang Chong held his hands behind his back and smiled as he gazed at the countless Uzan and Western Turks in the distant hills. Chapter 937. As the winds howled, Wang Chong stood on the walls, his robes flapping in the wind. From a distance, he exuded a carefree and confident demeanor. Light the torches. Wang Chong made a gesture, and the torches on the walls began to light along the edges of the walls. Clang clang clang. Chains connected to oil lamps hung down from the walls, lighting up the last dark corner of Talas. Whether it was the Arabs or Uzan, who wanted to launch a sneak attack on the steel defense line, or climb into the city of Talas in the dark, there were no longer any blind spots to speak of. Time slowly passed. Whether it was the Uzan, the Tang people, or the Arab camps, all of them were quiet. The three parties all seemed to be extremely restrained, and they were all living in harmony. From the first night until the hour of the Z period, there were no attacks. But even so, the mood in the city of Talas did not relax in the slightest. On the contrary, it only grew more tense. The guards of the eastern, western, and central city of Talas were all on high alert, even more careful than before. As the Z period passed, the darkness deepened and the drowsiness deepened. Everyone knew that night raids would often take place at this time. On the edge of the eastern battlefield, Bonfires blazed and the cries of vultures could be heard in the night sky. At least 5,000 or 6,000 Uzun soldiers were patrolling the perimeter formed by the bonfires. The places they patrolled were newly built fences and towering sentry posts. It was very difficult to imagine that the Uzun, who were not known for their agricultural culture, would be able to learn the tactics of the Central Plains in such a short time. Keep your spirits up. That general of the Tang dynasty loves sneak attacks the most. Keep your eyes open. Don't let the Tang people take advantage of any loopholes. Outside the sentry post, an Uzun general with a long saber at his waist loudly rebuked the soldiers. Yes, at the sentry post, groups of Uzun soldiers responded one after another. Their gazes were vigilant, like night falcons, sizing up the surroundings. Under such circumstances, no one could break through Uzun's defenses without being discovered. Gallop, clop, clop, clop. Smoke and dust billowed as teams of Uzun cavalry patrolled in the night. The dense blockade of cavalry and sentry posts formed a tight barrier that tightly guarded the camps of the Uzun and Western Turks. Time passed slowly. Dark clouds covered the moon, and the surroundings grew darker and darker. After some time, just outside the southern defensive line of the Uzun camp, there was a sudden rush of horse hooves. In an instant, the Uzun people were on high alert. Who are you? On the sentry tower, a Tibetan narrowed his eyes and turned his head, his eyes bright. He instantly drew his bow, the sharp arrowhead aimed at the area beyond the defense line, where the hooves were coming from. At almost the same time, in a radius of several hundred jang, countless patrolling soldiers, and even the Tibetans garrisoned elsewhere began to rush toward this area. Countless eyes in the darkness followed the sound of the sentry's voice and looked in the direction of the hooves. By relying on the light of the bonfires, one could see countless figures rapidly approaching. Don't fight. We're on the same side. A hurried Uzun voice could be heard in the darkness. But the soldiers on the sentry tower did not relax in the slightest at this familiar voice. On the contrary, they became even more nervous. Their entire bodies seemed to be facing a powerful foe. Thush! With a shrill whistle, a sharp arrow landed on the ground in front of those figures. Stop right there. All of you, dismount and take off your helmets. I want to see your true faces. This is the Prime Minister's order. Anyone who disobeys will die. The Uzun soldier on the sentry tower shouted. As he spoke, he grabbed a torch from the sentry tower and threw it over. The flame streaked across the sky and instantly lit up the night sky. But the next moment, an arrow streaked across the sky and hit the torch in the air. Ha ha ha, Daluan Ruozan is indeed powerful. He's prepared for this. Brothers, retreat. A loud laughter in Uzun came from the darkness. Before the figures could get close to the bonfires, they waved their hands and led a group of soldiers to retreat into the darkness. Chase! Hearing the laughter, the Uzun did not know what was going on. They roared angrily and urged their horses to give chase. Stop! All of you come back. The Prime Minister has ordered us not to chase a cornered enemy. Be careful of their ambush. A Tibetan officer rode out on a sturdy highland steed, his eyes gleaming as he hurried out to stop the group. The neighing of Ney's steed came to an abrupt halt, and the Uzun cavalry that had been giving chase immediately retreated. These Uzun are truly formidable. They didn't fall for our trick at all. Deep in the night, Sun Jiming watched the retreating Uzun soldiers, a hint of interest in his eyes. Daluan Ruozan truly is formidable. In the end, he's the wise minister of the Uzun. Even Marquis has nothing but praise for him, and he's already seen Marquis's ambush methods in the War of the Southwest, so he's probably prepared for it. This move of ours is practically useless against him. Behind Sun Jiming, a Tang dynasty horseman who had participated in the War of the Southwest said, Haha, it's more fun to be on guard. Let's retreat for now. In any case, we still have an entire night to play with the Uzun. Sun Jiming chuckled nonchalantly and led the group away, disappearing into the depths of the night. At almost the same time, the news that the Tang people had disguised themselves as Uzun soldiers to launch a sneak attack had reached the army camp behind the hills. The camp was brightly lit, and the precious map of the continent was spread out on a pitch-black metal table. Sitting next to it were Daluan Ruozan, Hueshu Wuzong, Dusong Mangpoj and Dewussili. Just as Prime Minister predicted, that brat is up to his old tricks again. Hueshu Wuzong coldly snorted at the messenger's words. Haha, he's using the same method twice. It seems like I overestimated him. Daluan Ruozan grinned unconcerned. In his view, Wang Chang's methods have been nothing more than a child's game, utterly meaningless. If this is all he has up his sleeve tonight, I'm afraid everyone will be able to rest easy. Could it be that this was all he had, and that Prime Minister overestimated him a little? Could a teenager have started learning the art of war in his mother's womb? Dewussili finally spoke, his voice tinged with resentment. Although he was unwilling to admit it, Dewussili's celestial wolf's divine procession had run into an undefeatable opponent for the first time, and this opponent's cultivation and strength were both lower than his. This was something that Dewussili had never encountered before. To do this in front of Hueshu Wuzong, Dusong Mangpoj, and the other great generals had utterly humiliated Dewussili. On the side, Dusong Mangpoj slightly creased his brow at these words, but he said nothing. Haha, general's words are reasonable, but there's no harm in being careful. We should still be on our guard, and be a little cautious. Daluan Ruozan only faintly smiled, offering no retort. Daluan Ruozan would never underestimate an opponent who had once defeated him, but there was no need to explain this to Dewussili. Prime Minister, do you need me to join the patrol? Dusong Mangpoj, who had been silent this entire time, suddenly spoke. This way. If the Tang people make a move, I can come to their aid at any time, and make sure that they never return. There's no need. Daluan Ruozan's smile faded into a frown, and he quickly rejected Dusong Mangpoj's proposal. In the Battle of the Triangular Gap, Dayan Mangpoj had died in battle, and Dusong Mangpoj's tens of thousands of soldiers had been almost completely wiped out. Ever since that battle, Dusong Mangpoj had been in a rush to get revenge, even kneeling in front of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. How could Daluan Ruozan not understand what he was thinking? But now was not the time to let his emotions affect his decisions. As a general, you have to oversee the center of the army. You can't do everything yourself. You can just leave these minor matters to your subordinates. Moreover, the Tang people are crafty. Whether it's that Wang Chong or Gao Xianji, they're both experts at scheming. If they learn that you're participating in the patrol, they can use tactics to tire you out, making you constantly on the run without any time to rest. If a major battle breaks out, our defeat will be assured. With these final words, Daluan Ruozan's expression became extremely solemn. Dusong Mangpoj was quiet for a few moments, and then he finally nodded. The night was getting darker, and the faint moonlight from before had completely dimmed. 15 minutes later, while Daluan Ruozan and the others were still discussing countermeasures in the tent, the panting of hooves came from the center of the Uzan defense line. Who goes there? In the dark night, countless arrowheads were aimed in the direction of the sound of the horses' hooves. The Uzan had been prepared, and anyone approaching would immediately trigger an immediate response from the Uzan. Piercing the defenses of the Uzan was no easy task. It's us. Don't attack. We've received orders from the Dewussili Great General to report to your Uzan commander's camp. A choppy voice in Uzan came out of the darkness. The Western Turks. A hint of surprise flashed through the eyes of the soldiers on the sentry post, and they slowly loosened their bows. Even a muscular and swarthy Uzan general with a long saber at his waist slowly sheathed his saber. In the light of the bonfires, they could clearly see that the figures on the other side were wearing Western Turkic armor. Put down the arrows. Without my order, no one is allowed to attack. The swarthy Uzan general ordered as he waved down his arm. His eyes had been brimming with wariness, but they were now much more relaxed. The Western Turks and the Uzan were allies, and although they did not speak the same language, they still had a common enemy. Fighting and causing misunderstandings would be detrimental to the overall situation. Many thanks. Chapter 938. Wait a moment. As the Western Turks were about to approach, the Uzan general at the sentry post suddenly called out to stop them. At the same time, he turned around and gestured behind him. While the Turks were still confused, a white horse galloped out from the rear. Which cavalry unit are you from? Do you have proof of the great general's summons? Do you have a token? A string of harsh words in Western Turkic came out of the general's mouth, leaving everyone dumbfounded. There was a Western Turkic soldier in the Uzun army. Stop! Kill them! While the Western Turks were still in a daze, the Turkic soldier on the white horse seemed to notice something and pointed a finger across from him as he harshly bellowed. What are you waiting for? Swish, swish, swish. Without the slightest hesitation, countless arrows shot toward the Western Turks. Ha ha ha, this Dalwan Ruozan truly is formidable. He even managed to guard against this. Consider him formidable. He actually managed to plant a Western Turk in the Uzun camp. Brothers, retreat. After dodging the arrows, the Western Turks heartily laughed. As expected, it was the Tang people in disguise. The Turks swiftly left with the galloping of horses. General, this Dalwan Ruozan is very difficult to deal with. A Tang people soldier wearing Western Turkic armor said, as they left the Uzun camp. If he was easy to deal with, how could he be called a wise minister? There would have been no need for Marquis to personally make such a grand plan. Chung Sanyuan took off his helmet and heartily laughed. This Dalwan Ruozan's defense is truly impenetrable. If this continues, it'll be very difficult for us to gain anything. One of the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty said unwillingly. Using the gap between the Western Turks and the Uzun to disguise themselves as Western Turks and launch a sneak attack on the Uzun was a rather good idea. But who could have expected that Dalwan Ruozan would have placed real Western Turks in his army to distinguish the real from the fake? It was clear that he had long since anticipated this. This made the soldiers of the Tang dynasty, who knew little about Dalwan Ruozan, feel deeply troubled. Fighting with such a powerful opponent made their scalps tingle. It seemed that their every move was within his expectations. At this moment, everyone suddenly felt how powerful their Marquis was. What are you afraid of? Ignore him. He's just a defeated opponent of Marquis. No matter how powerful Dalwan Ruozan is, can he be more powerful than Marquis? Chung Sanyuan laughed heartily. He did not mind the soldiers' worry at all. Let's go. Our mission is complete. I'll leave the rest to Kong Xian and the others. Galloped off into the distance, the group returning to the Tang dynasty camp in Talas. Bang! A few moments after Chung Sanyuan's group left, the Western Turkic camp was also in a state of turmoil. Prime Minister. We just received word that the Tang people disguised themselves as Western Turks and launched a sneak attack on our camp. A messenger rushed in from outside the tent of the Uzun commander. Great General, our camp has been attacked. The Tang people disguised themselves as Uzun soldiers and launched a sneak attack on us. A few moments later, another Western Turk had charged in. Two pieces of news, one after the other, were delivered to Dalwan Ruozan. Everyone in the tent looked at each other in dismay, and in a flash, Huashu Wazong, Dawusili, and Dusong Mangpoj all turned to Dalwan Ruozan. Dalwan Ruozan's initial plan to plant soldiers in each other's camps had been somewhat disapproving, but it now appeared that if not for Dalwan Ruozan's arrangements, the Tang people would have already succeeded. Just think about it. If the Tang disguised themselves as Tibetans or Western Turks, and openly approached under the banner of an alliance, no one would have been able to predict such a thing unless they had made preparations beforehand. Prime Minister is wise. Dawusili truly admires you. Dawusili said. Only now did he truly admire this Prime Minister of the Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage. Dalwan Ruozan only smiled. His brows slightly lowered as a pensive look appeared in his eyes. Prime Minister, what's wrong? Huashu Wazong and Dusong Mangpoj both sensed something and spoke at the same time. Dalwan Ruozan's reaction was completely unlike that of someone who had predicted his opponent's movements and won. It's hard to say. Dalwan Ruozan slightly creased his brow. If Wang Chong had only made his first move, I might have calmly smiled and told everyone that there was nothing to worry about. But he put on our armor and attacked the Western Turks, and then he put on the armor of the Western Turks to attack us. Although everything seems to have gone according to my plan, I don't dare to relax after these two incidents. Prime Minister means that his actions are just to confuse us and that he has other plans. Dewusley said. After all, he was one of the top-class great generals of the Western Turkic Khaganate, and Dalwin Ruozen's words made Dewusley vaguely think of something. I can't be sure for now, but I can guarantee that this is not all he has. Since he's made 3 moves, he definitely has more up his sleeve. But I still don't understand. How did he break through my defenses? Dalwin Ruozen said, his brow creased in deep confusion. Dalwin Ruozen had set up many bonfires outside the camp, making it impossible to silently approach without being discovered. Moreover, Dalwin Ruozen had placed Western Turkic soldiers near each sentry post, and the Western Turks had done the same. Wang Chong's 2 consecutive failures were enough to illustrate the problem. The Western Turks and the Uzun camps had been tightly guarded by Dalwin Ruozen. There was basically no other way than to force their way in. But in a night raid, there weren't many soldiers in the first place. Forcing their way in was basically suicidal. Dalwin Ruozen had no idea what Wang Chong would do. Dalwin Ruozen had once speculated that not even he could successfully break through such tight defenses. The tent was quiet, as everyone fell into deep thought. Haha, but he has his plans and I have my own. There's no need to worry about him. Huashu Wuzong, it's about time for our men to move out. It's impolite not to reciprocate, so let's give him a pleasant surprise. Dalwin Ruozen suddenly raised his head, a faint smile on his lips as he looked into the distance. Yes, Prime Minister. Coming back to his senses, Huashu Wuzong slightly bowed and quickly left. Time slowly passed, and while Huashu Wuzong was leaving the tent to deliver his orders, on the northern side of the Uzun camp, a mournful wolf howl resounded through the night sky, drifting far away in the darkness. Listen, even these beasts have feelings, and know how to mourn for their comrades. In today's battle, the Tang have killed mountains and seas of wolves. We can't even count how many there are. It wasn't just those wolves that died today. Those Tang people's ballistae were too formidable. We and the Western Turks have a total of 120,000 soldiers, but in today's battle, they've killed more than 40,000. After all, we're all elites. Whispers could be heard in the darkness. Not far from a sentry post 10-some meters high, 2 fully armored Uzun soldiers were leaning against each other. I finally understand why the Tang people were able to stop the hundreds of thousands of Arab soldiers at Talas. That Tang dynasty commander is truly too formidable. You all saw the battle during the day. If not for the Celestial Wolf Cavalry, the Mutri Great Cavalry, and the Western Turkic Great General, we would have lost more than half of our men, and our losses would have been even worse. The 2 couldn't help but shiver at the thought of the bitter battle during the day, a chill running down their backs. The Uzun had never been a coward, but that depended on who their opponent was. Far too many soldiers had been gathered in the tiny city of Talas, and almost all the factions that had appeared here were elites. Even the Uzun soldiers couldn't help but feel a lingering fear in the face of such elite soldiers and ballistae. Russell. As the 2 of them were chatting, a peculiar feeling suddenly came from nearby. The 2 of them shuddered, and abruptly turned their heads. Who is it? One of them had drawn his bow, and the other had drawn his saber, as they both turned in the direction of the sound. Who? The wind whistled, and with the help of the light from the bonfire, the 2 of them saw a huge green wolf slowly walking past the tall sentry tower. Damn it! It's a Turkic wolf! The 2 of them looked at each other awkwardly. The army had long ago received orders that the commander of the Tang dynasty was extremely fond of night raids. From the Z period until now, the army had sounded 3 alarms, and all 3 times, the Tang dynasty cavalry had approached in disguise. The 2 of them couldn't help but feel a little paranoid. Bastards, what are you doing? Just when the 2 of them were feeling awkward, they heard a harsh shout and a gust of wind. A muscular Tibetan general suddenly appeared behind them, his eyes like swords as he stared at the pair. Didn't I order you to patrol? If something happens, I'll hold you responsible. Yes, General. The 2 felt a chill in their hearts and hurriedly left, vanishing into the darkness. This night was destined to be a sleepless one. A cool breeze blew, and the deeper it went the colder it got. And if one looked down from the sky, One could see that the two steel walls in front of the city of Talas were illuminated by countless torches, dazzling in the darkness. The light of the torches illuminated a bright area in the darkness, serving as a barrier between the 100,000 Chishi reinforcements and the Anshi Protectorate army in the city. Gallop! Chapter 939. Who goes there? With a sudden shout, many figures appeared behind the seemingly empty second steel wall. With the creaking of gears, the fearsome Tang Dynasty ballistae appeared behind the steel walls, their savage arrowheads gleaming with a cold light in the darkness. Stop! They're on our side. We were summoned by Marquis to deal with the Uzun. The mission is complete. Come back to report. A voice came from the distance. Oh, how was the harvest? The Tang Dynasty general behind the second steel wall asked, his eyes clearly much more relaxed. Tonight, Marquis had truly dispatched many soldiers to ambush the Uzun. That Dalwin Ruozan is too powerful. We were unable to get close. We ambushed him several times, but all of them failed. So we came back to report. The other side replied. Their warhorses slowed down, but they did not stop. That's true. That Prime Minister of Uzun is truly formidable. Even General Cheng Sanyuan and the others failed, much less you. The candle flames flickered, and the Tang Dynasty general behind the steel walls said unsurprised. But Marquis has ordered that everything must be done according to the rules. Dismount your horses, and leave them to the rear to deal with. Remove your weapons and come in. Understood. The other side nodded and quickly approached the steel defense line. 50 paces, 30 paces. As they got closer and closer to the second defense line. When they were still 20-some paces away, twang. The bowstrings trembled, and the gears vibrated. Thick bolts suddenly shot out like lightning. Before the enemy could react, puff, 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 dozens of allies, who were riding their horses in the dark, were pierced through by the bolts and fell from their horses like wooden stakes. Nay, the warhorses neighed. This sudden turn of events left everyone dumbfounded. What are you doing? A voice filled with both shock and anger came from the other side. They were completely shocked by the scene of their own people killing each other. Ha ha ha, still pretending. At this moment, illuminated by the flames, the Tang Dynasty general gripped his scabbard in his right hand and suddenly appeared in a gap in the city of steel. Marquis sent out a total of 4 armies. The first 3 armies have already completed their missions and returned. The 4th army hadn't even launched their attack yet, so how could they return and defeat? Why didn't you choose a better person to lie to, you crows? Hiss! Hide! Man! The last few words were spoken word by word, and they revealed waves of ridicule. Buzz! For a moment, the opposing Great Tang army was deathly still. Then, all the dead silence and shock turned into an earth-shattering roar. Kill! Kill them! Kill all the Tang people! That outside the steel walls, the Great Tang army that had been in a state of shock suddenly revealed its true face. Waves of arrogant shouts and shouts in the Uzun language soared into the sky. Hong! The warhorses galloped as fast as lightning, suddenly accelerating toward the second line of defense. As the warhorses charged, the elite cavalry of the Uzun army reached into the bellies of their horses and took out the heavy shields that they had prepared beforehand. Kail! With their disguises removed, these Tibetans roared, their bodies exploding with killing intent as they shot toward the Tang inside the defense line, especially the Tang ballistae. Translated by Hypersheep 325 twang twang twang. The ballistae boomed as ballista bolts flew through the air. But this time, they were prepared, and the lethality of the ballistae was greatly reduced. At the very front of this Uzun army was an Uzun general, his aura soaring to the heavens. With a flick of his wrist, he unleashed a storm of energy that sent a ballista bolt flying toward him. Charge! This Tibetan general became one with his horse and shot forward with unbelievable speed, taking the lead as he charged toward the second defense line. This sudden movement immediately attracted everyone's attention. Focus fire! With a heaven-shaking roar, the ballista bolts began to converge on the Uzun general. But with a boom, the warhorse whinnied and fell to the ground. As for the Tibetan general, before his horse could be hit by the ballista bolts, He had leapt off his horse. Sticking close to the ground, he flitted through the air with astonishing speed and appeared at an opening in the second defense line. In that instant, under the illumination of the furnace and the torch, a face with a chiseled face was clearly outlined. It wasn't Huoba Senji, but it was a Saint Martial realm expert just like him. Careful! At the gap in the steel walls, the great Tang commander gave a heaven-shaking roar. Countless soldiers and countless attacks immediately began to rumble toward the Saint Martial expert of Yusang. But this Saint Martial Tibetan general paid no attention to their attacks. With a blink, he shot toward the first ballista. Bang! In a flash of light, an invisible energy of law pierced through the air and gathered on the fist of the Uzun general of the Yarlung lineage, Abu Sangji, who smashed his fist against one of the ballistae. With a boom, the ballista shuddered. The sturdy and powerful ballista was instantly torn to pieces, its parts flying into the air and scattering to the ground. It felt like it was made of paper. Ignore them. Hurry up and destroy their ballistae. Abu Sangji's furious roar resounded through the night. After destroying one ballista, he immediately charged toward the second, ignoring the attacks of the others. As a valiant general of the Yarlung lineage, Abu Sangji's martial arts had not yet reached the level of a brigadier general like Huoba Senji, but Abu Sangji's martial arts were still extremely frightening. He was not much weaker than Huoba Senji. Although Daluan Ruozen's westward march against the Tang people appeared to be going against the Tsimpo on the surface, he had countless people assisting him. Abu Sangji had served at Daluan Ruozen's side at the behest of the Yarlung lineage king. He had been closely following the Tang army this entire time. The ballistae of the Tang dynasty were extremely tough and could be repaired. Only metal element experts could completely destroy them and make them impossible to repair. This was the true reason why Daluan Ruozen had sent him on this night raid. The Tang dynasty army at Talas was now rife with experts, including many top-class Tang generals. They could arrive at any moment, and not even Abu Sangji dared to act recklessly. Time was short, and Abu Sangji had to destroy the ballistae as quickly as possible. This was the true purpose of this night raid. Otherwise, killing a few hundred, or even 1,000 of the 100,000 Tang dynasty soldiers would be meaningless. It would be like trying to put out a cart of firewood with a cup of water. Roar! Kill! With Abu Sangji taking the lead, the other Uzun cavalry braved all sorts of attacks to break through the second defense line. None of them engaged in battle. Everyone had a clear goal. Once they broke through the defense line, they would immediately break through the ballistae. Boom! A Tibetan soldier charged up to a ballista and smashed down with his fist, instantly smashing the ballista into smithereens. Enemy attack! Shrill cries resounded through the night as wave after wave of Tang dynasty soldiers surged in. The effect of choosing to launch a sneak attack after the Z period was now on full display. Even though the city of Talas had more than 100,000 soldiers, the vast majority of them were in a state of deep sleep. They had to prepare for the battle that might occur during the day, so not many soldiers were rushing over. But even so, the Tang dynasty cavalry that had been summoned from all sides still outnumbered the Uzun soldiers, who had come to launch a sneak attack. Wave after wave of cavalry surged forward, their swords and sabers flickering in the light of the flames. Hurry! Abu Sangji's shout resounded through the second defense line. Countless Uzun cavalry charged through the gaps in the defense line, enduring the attacks of the Tang dynasty soldiers as they charged toward the ballistae. The soldiers that Abu Sangji had brought with him were the most unique soldiers of the Uzun. All of them had metal element abilities, and although their abilities differed in strength, they were the most effective against the Tang dynasty ballistae. Bang bang bang. 1 2 3. In a few short moments, 10 some Tang dynasty ballistae had been destroyed by Abu Sangji. On the other side, the thousands of Uzun cavalry had clearly divided into two groups. One group held round shields to block the attacks of the Tang people, while the other focused on attacking the Tang dynasty ballistae behind the defense line. Although these people were far weaker than Abu Sangji, they had the advantage in numbers. In a few short moments, 70 to 80 Tang dynasty ballistae had been blown into the air and scattered in fragments. 100, 200. Although the Uzun elite cavalry had only been charging for a short time, their clear goal allowed them to destroy 200 to 300 Tang Dynasty ballistae. For the Tang Dynasty army, which only had 3,000 ballistae in total, this was an enormous loss, and the losses were still growing. However, the Uzun army had also paid an enormous price. Ah! Screams filled the air. In just a few moments, more than 1,000 Uzun elites had died behind the second defense line. There were simply too many Uzun soldiers charging in from all directions. Each Uzun cavalry was being attacked by at least 4 or 5 Tang Dynasty soldiers at the same time. Even though these people were all elites and each of them was wearing the best armor, it was still difficult for them to withstand so many attacks. Whoosh! Whoosh! Swords pierced through the chinks in the armor of these Uzun soldiers, stabbing through their chests from the front and coming out from the back, their blades as red as blood. The eyes of these Uzun cavalry were wide open, their throats gurgling as they fell to the ground. Their blood flowed down their bodies and into the ground, dyeing it red. A thick bloody mist and the stench of blood filled the air. Chapter 940. Wonderful. Abu Sangji's heart was bursting with excitement. In just a few short moments, they had already destroyed 400 to 500 Tang Dynasty ballistae. This was an unimaginable harvest. It had to be known that this ballista force could easily wipe out 5,000 to 6,000 Uzun cavalry in a single volley. And if they were used on the battlefield for a long time, their lethality would be unimaginable. Where there is a harvest, there is a price to pay. If we can destroy all the Tang Dynasty ballistae, it doesn't matter if all of us die here. Abu Sangji quietly said to himself. He felt no pity for those who had died. A night raid had always been a risky operation with no return. Those who survived would be lucky, and those who did not would die. The most important thing was whether or not they had achieved their strategic objectives. Get ready. Retreat. More and more Tang people were gathering around them, and each ballista was being guarded by a large number of soldiers. In these circumstances, it would be extremely difficult to succeed. Abu Sangji immediately gave the order to retreat. Boom! In a flash, Abu Sangji appeared 20 paces away, the golden stellar energy of the Saint Martial realm exploding. "Aya!" Screams rang out as 30-some fully armored Tang soldiers were sent flying like ragdolls, vomiting blood as they flew through the air. "Run!" Abu Sangji turned his head and shouted at the trapped Uzun cavalry. After doing all this, he leaped into the air, immediately snatching a Tang warhorse and mounting it. Without any hesitation, he charged toward the eastern side of the second defense line. Abu Sangji could see that the distant gate of Talas was open, and the Anxi Protectorate Army's vice commander Cheng Qianli was already riding out. Cheng Qianli was a peak brigadier general and one of the strongest soldiers of the Tang Dynasty army. Abu Sangji was currently no match for him. No matter how much Abu Sangji wanted to expand his victory, he had no choice but to retreat. Abu Sangji reacted quickly. Ney let out a long neigh, and Abu Sangji leapt out of the gap in the second defense line. "Everyone listen up. Don't stay here. Retreat at full speed." Abu Sangji's screams echoed across the battlefield. The results of this battle were far greater than he had imagined. A single ambush had destroyed 400 to 500 ballistae. If he did this a few more times, the Tang Dynasty's ballista army would essentially be wiped out. Now, as long as they returned to the camp, this operation would be considered a complete success. "Go!" Abu Sangji squeezed his legs and exerted all the strength in his body. Boundless Saint Martial realm stellar energy poured into the warhorse beneath him. The man and horse galloped through the night at an astonishing speed. 100 feet, 200 feet. In the blink of an eye, Abu Sangji had escaped from the battle. He had run more than 60 meters from the second defense line. Just as he was about to escape, Abu Sangji suddenly saw a figure. This figure was tall and thin. He stood there quietly, as if he had been waiting for a long time. The night wind blew, and the person's long hair danced in the wind. He exuded a calm and composed aura, as if he was in control of the situation. More importantly, the moment he saw this person, Abu Sangji had a strange feeling. It was as if this person had predicted his escape route and had been waiting for him. "Who goes there?" Abu Sengji's eyes widened as he shouted, "Haha, the person who will kill you." An indifferent chuckle came from the darkness. It sounded extremely young. Boom! Before Abu Sengji could react, the slender figure's left and right shoulders suddenly rose up, one gold and one red. A sun and a moon, a bizarre sight in the darkness. Abu Sengji grimaced, and an intense sense of danger welled up in his heart. Mabwa's fist of the great sun. Without the slightest hesitation, Abu Sengji used his most powerful technique. A vast golden light exploded from his body, making him seem like a god. Abu Sengji's aura exploded with blazing heat, turning him into a sun that could melt gold and iron. Within this sun was a massive and majestic mountain range. The Great Mabwa Mountain. This was the Uzun Empire's Demon Mother Mountain, the embodiment of the legendary Great Demon Mother of the Uzun Empire. Unlike the other royal lineages, the Uzun Empire's Yarlung lineage worshipped the Great Demon Mother, the mother of all demons. Abu Sengji's Mabwa's Fist of the Great Sun was one of the top martial arts of the Yarlung lineage. Rumble! In the darkness of the night, Abu Sengji and his horse were as one. Like a burning sun, they shot toward the Taoist like a meteor. At the same time, Abu Sengji heard a faint chuckle. Great Inyang Heaven Creation Art. Rumble! There was an earth-shattering boom, as the two figures collided more than 60 meters away from the second defense line of the Tang dynasty. At that moment, time and space were silent. The sun and the moon were silent, and everything seemed to have come to a standstill. Then, a strong wind swept in all directions, and even the shockwaves that were more than 60 meters away hit the steel wall, with a series of loud bangs. This earth-shaking battle had begun fiercely and ended simply. In the blink of an eye, this battle between Saint martial experts was over. As everyone watched, Wang Chong stood on the ground in plain clothes, his hand gripping Abu Sengji's neck like a pair of iron pincers. This fierce general of the Yarlung royal lineage of the Uzun Empire was like a duck, his feet off the ground, unable to break free from Wang Chong's grasp. Under the effect of the Great Inyang Heaven Creation Art, an endless stream of Saint martial energy surged into Wang Chong's body. Wang Chong's aura surged as his strength continued to grow under the influence of the Saint martial energy. Meanwhile, Abu Sengji's strength continued to drop like a punctured rubber ball, and his stalwart body began to shrivel and wither like the skin of an orange. Evil, evil art. Abu Sengji's eyes were wide with fear. He had fought all his life, never fearing anything, never retreating. Even if he died on the battlefield, he would not regret it. But what was happening to him now had completely defied common sense, and could not be explained with logic. Without question, this was the most terrifying evil art of all. Wang Chong only sneered, not even bothering to explain. Too weak. With a faint smile, Wang Chong snapped Abu Sengji's neck. All of the latter's energy had been sucked dry by Wang Chong, and he fell from Wang Chong's hand like a ragged sack. With Abu Sengji's energy, Wang Chong's strength had once more swelled to another level. Saint Martial Tier 6 or 7 is still not enough. I thought that Daluan Ruozhen would at least send out a brigadier general, but it seems like he's even more cautious than I thought. Given Wang Chong's current strength, he wouldn't even need to use the God King Yama to easily kill anyone who wasn't a top-class general. Abu Sengji alone was far from being his match. Marquis. As Wang Chong was slowly drawing back his energy, the sound of galloping hooves could be heard. Sun Jiming and the others dismounted and rushed to Wang Chong's side. How did it go? Wang Chong flicked his sleeves and raised his head. We killed more than 3,000 people in total. The rest have all escaped. The Uzun this time are very powerful, and it seems like Daluan Ruozhen has made ample preparations. If not for Marquis's foresight, we really might have suffered heavy losses. Sun Jiming bowed. Sun Jiming admired Wang Chong from the bottom of his heart. Back at Deflecting Blade Manor, everyone had viewed Wang Chong as a god, and they all looked forward to fighting alongside Wang Chong on the battlefield. But it was only after fighting alongside Wang Chong on the battlefield that Sun Jiming truly understood how formidable Wang Chong was. So many people had surrounded the Uzun, but they had only managed to kill 3,000 some, and quite a few had even managed to escape. If not for Wang Chong's foresight, the Tang dynasty would have suffered grievous losses. All their ballistae would have been destroyed, and the Uzun would have been able to escape unscathed. In a battle against a legendary figure like Daluan Ruozan, one had to use all one's strength. One could not be the slightest bit careless. This was not something someone like Sun Jiming could contend against. In all of the Tang dynasty army, probably only Wang Chong could exchange blows with him. Not only could Wang Chong block his attacks, he could even suppress him. Marquis is even stronger than the legends of Deflecting Blade Manor say. Sun Jiming lowered his head and said sincerely to himself, "Very good. There's no need to worry about those who escaped. Tell Shui Qianjun to have the pursuing soldiers withdraw," Wang Chong indifferently said. "In addition, how are things on Li Sai's side?" Replying to Marquis, General Li and the others have already successfully infiltrated the camp. There's still no sign of activity on the Uzun's side, so they probably haven't discovered anything yet. But based on the time, General Li and the others should be moving soon. Sun Jiming sternly said. In this night raid, Sun Jiming, Cheng Sanyuan, and Kong Xian were merely a cover bait. The army led by Li Sai was the true attacking force. Boom! As if in response to Sun Jiming's words, a massive explosion came from the distant Uzun camp. A bonfire was blasted into the sky by stellar energy and transformed into a firework that attracted the attention of countless people. They're moving out. Sun Jiming's heart trembled as he subconsciously asked. The distant fireworks were like some sort of signal, instantly causing the quiet Tibetan camp to fall into an uproar. Shouts and shouts shook the heavens. In the darkness, countless Tibetans were charging toward the place where the fireworks were exploding. Daluan Ruozan, you're still a step behind. Wang Chong looked into the distance and smiled. Then he turned to Sun Jiming. Sun Jiming passed down my order. Tell Chen Burang to begin the operation. Yes, Marquis. Receiving the order, Sun Jiming immediately flew off, disappearing into the darkness. Not long after he disappeared, 53, a shrill cry sounded. In the darkness, a massive boulder shot into the sky, drawing an arc in the air as it smashed toward the Uzun camp. And this boulder from the catapult had completely lifted the curtains on this three-way night raid. Chapter 941. What's going on? What happened? In the commander's tent behind the distant hills, Daluan Ruozan suddenly stood up, his face paling. He had already dispatched the soldiers to attack the Tang dynasty's ballistae, but before they could return with any success, something had happened in his own backyard. And what made Daluan Ruozan most uneasy was that even though he had made so many arrangements, heard the sounds of fighting, and seen so many fires, there had still been no report from the messengers. This sort of situation would have never occurred in Daluan Ruozan's plans. Prime Minister, enemy attack. The Tang people have launched an attack. A panicked Uzun soldier rushed in upon hearing the noise. What about their numbers? Direction? Cavalry or infantry? Why has there still been no report? The sentries, have they not responded at all? Daluan Ruozan sternly said, almost instinctively sensing that something was wrong. Replying to Prime Minister, we have no idea how many people they have, or which direction they're coming from. The camp is in chaos. Everyone only knows that the Tang people have launched an attack, but we have no idea where they are. The Uzun soldier who had rushed in said, a look of unease on his face. What? Daluan Ruozan grimaced. Without time to speak, he strode over the metal table, threw aside the curtain, and rushed out of the tent. Behind him, Dusong Mangpoj and Huashu Wuzong exchanged glances and followed. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew a spark toward Daluan Ruozan and Huashu Wuzong, who had just walked out of the tent. In a flash, the spark was obliterated in the air. As the air howled, Daluan Ruozan and Huashu Wuzong raised their heads. They immediately saw a massive and blurry silhouette flying over their heads. With a boom, it smashed into the camp behind them. Aya! Screams rang out as a blazing bonfire was struck by a massive meteor, exploding into fireworks. Catapults. As this thought flashed through Daluan Ruozan's mind, his entire body turned into a nasty grimace. What's going on? Didn't we already pull back the camp, out of the range of the catapults? How could the Tang people's catapults still be able to throw so far and attack the camp behind us? At this moment, Dusong Mangpoch had walked to Daluan Ruozen's right side, his expression extremely grave. In the battle during the day, everyone had seen the power of the Tang dynasty's steel catapults. Almost all the catapults of the Uzun and Arabs had been destroyed by the Tang dynasty. Thus, when setting up camp at night, Daluan Ruozen had taken special precautions against this move. Other than a few sentries, 80% of the army was outside the range of the catapults. Hundreds of boulders rained down, covering almost all of the Uzun camp. This was not normal, because they've moved the catapults forward, Daluan Ruozen said. That sliver of unease in his heart had finally been confirmed. Only now did Wang Chong reveal his true move. The steel catapults in the city of Talas could not reach this place. He was completely sure that Wang Chong had moved these steel catapults out of the city of Talas, and even moved them forward, to an extremely far location. Only in this way could those steel catapults possibly reach the Uzun camp. Catapults that had left the camp were very easy to destroy, but the pitch-black darkness provided the best cover for these catapults. Not even Daluan Ruozen had expected Wang Chong to have such a move. At this moment, Daluan Ruozen suddenly understood why no soldier had reported back after so long. Sentries? Where are the sentries? Why has there been no news of the Tang people's invasion? Daluan Ruozen said sternly, although the stone rain from the catapults looked very powerful. In fact, it was all bark and no bite. The actual lethality was very limited. If they only relied on the attack of the catapults, even if the entire Uzun army fell into chaos, not many people would die. Daluan Ruozen knew that the attack of these catapults was not the real goal. They were just a cover. The real main force of the attack was definitely an army of the Tang people that had already sneaked in. However, Daluan Ruozen had already made full preparations. If the sentries were attacked, he must have received the news. Until now, Daluan Ruozen still did not know what the problem was. Prime Minister, there is no trace of the enemy in front. Prime Minister, there is no trace of the enemy in front. Prime Minister, there is no trace of the enemy in front. A constant stream of news came from the sentries. Even though the camp was in chaos, the information system Daluan Ruozen had established was still working. But to everyone's shock, even though the camp was in chaos and screams could be heard, the sentries had not reported the presence of any Tang dynasty cavalry. How could this be? Huashu Wuzong and Dusong Mangpoch looked at each other in dismay. Even though they did not have sufficient evidence, their great general's intuition told them that a Tang dynasty army had definitely infiltrated their camp. However, the information they received from the sentry post in front of them made them completely unsure. Screams rose and fell from every direction. In the darkness, it was impossible to tell whether these were the clangs of swords or the crashing of catapults. Even the best of great generals would be rendered useless in the face of this purest strategy. Prime Minister, I'll go and take a look, Huashu Wuzong suddenly said, and before he could finish speaking, he had already taken off, moving so quickly that no one could react. Prime Minister, I'll also go and take a look. A few moments later, Dusong Mangpoch also took off, choosing a different direction, and vanishing into the darkness. Daluan Ruozen did not even have time to stop him. As top-class great generals, although they could not see through Wang Chong's plan, they still had their own methods of seeing through it. A peak Saint Martial Imperial Great General wouldn't need much time to patrol the entire camp. Prime Minister, do you need me to go? Du Wuxili's voice came from behind him as he walked out of his tent. Few people noticed that one of the Western Turkic messengers had silently departed, vanishing in another direction. The Tang dynasty's attack this time had been extremely abrupt and clever. Du Wuxili had no choice but to worry about his own army. Thus, when Daluan Ruozen and the others had left the commander's camp, Du Wuxili had been waiting for news. But based on the results, the Tang dynasty had chosen to attack the Uzun people. This was good news for the Western Turks. There's no need. Daluan Ruozen immediately refused. Huashu Wuzong and Dusong Mangpoch were enough. Sending 3 great generals would be a waste of time and energy. And if something unexpected happened, they would not be able to respond. Someone, pass on my order. If any place is under attack, report it to me. As Wuxia looked on in surprise, Daluan Ruozan lowered his head, extended a finger, and began to draw a map on the ground. Wuxia glanced at it, and immediately recognized it. The map of the Uzun camp. Not good. Enemy attack. The great general has ordered everyone to go and provide reinforcements. Somewhere in the middle of the Uzun camp, the army was in chaos. Some Uzun soldiers panicked and began to flee toward the sentry post. What? Where? An Uzun soldier was on high alert, scanning the area like a hawk. When he heard the commotion, he paled and turned his head. Over there. The leading Tibetan horseman turned his head to point in a certain direction. At this moment, the air whistled as a massive boulder fell from the sky. Boom! Bonfires soared into the sky, and screams filled the air. Follow me. With no time to think, the leading Uzun general unsheathed his saber and ordered the surrounding soldiers to charge toward the area where the boulder had fallen. But as the 2 groups of soldiers brushed past each other, squelch! The sharp edge of a sword pierced through the Uzun general's body and protruded out of his back. The thick plate armor on the Uzun general's body could even block the finest swords and sabers of the Arabian Empire. But it was like paper in front of this sword. Time seemed to stop at this moment. The gathered Tibetan warriors were both shocked and enraged, all of them stunned by this sight. "Milord! Bastards, you dare attack Milord! Kill them!" No one had expected that the kinsmen, who had just fled and gathered the reinforcements, would attack them. Clang, clang, clang. Countless sabers and swords were unsheathed, aimed at the kinsmen, and howled as they charged forward. At this moment, the most shocked was the Uzun general who had been stabbed by the sword. This sword had been too sudden, and he had been completely unprepared. You're not one of us. In the final moment, the most clear-headed person was the Uzun general. Shock, astonishment, but even more than that, extreme rage. Boom! The moment the sword pierced through the Uzun general, a majestic stellar energy swept out of his body. Even though he was injured, the Uzun general was still as powerful as ever. Die for me! A cold light flashed through the Uzun general's eyes. Even if he had to die, he would drag this person down with him. But the Uzun general's final attack was met with an even more powerful and majestic sword chi. This sword was like a mountain, and with a single slash, the Uzun general's head was cut off. Kill them! Chapter 942. Bang! With Huang Boshan's order, the Tinsum Uzun soldiers behind him drew their incomparably sharp Wuxia steel swords and charged at the Uzun soldiers near the sentry tower. Swish! 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 The soldiers near the sentry tower were no match for them at all, and they fell to their swords in anger. Only the Tang dynasty's Wuxian cavalry could kill a Uzun soldier with a wave of their hand. The plate armor of the Uzun soldiers was like nothing in front of the sharp Wuxia steel swords. Although the Tang dynasty soldiers under Huang Boshan's command were fewer in number, their teamwork was better, their strength was higher, and their weapons and equipment were more formidable. In the blink of an eye, Uzun soldiers fell to the ground in droves, their corpses strewn all over the sentry tower. Those who could participate in this night raid were the elites of the elites, and the battle ended much faster than expected. A few moments later, besides Huang Batian and the Tinsum Tang dynasty soldiers behind him, there were no longer any Uzun soldiers standing behind them. Let's go! Huang Batian glanced around, sword in hand. Without the slightest hesitation, he led a group of Tang dynasty elites disguised as Uzun soldiers in a charge in another direction. The Uzun soldiers reacted much faster than expected. Even with a large number of catapults acting as cover, hundreds of boulders raining down on the Uzun camp, causing a great disturbance, the battle around the sentry tower quickly attracted a large number of Uzun soldiers. The sound of horse hooves rang out, and battle cries shook the heavens. Enemy attack! Someone is attacking the sentry tower. Come with me. Hurry and reinforce the sentry tower. The Tang people. It must be the Tang people. Follow me to kill them all. That the sound of hooves and footsteps rapidly approached. But before these people could arrive, Huang Batian had already led his group away. They had come in too much of a hurry, and the battle had ended too quickly. In addition, these people had no desire to continue fighting. By the time they arrived, all they saw was a ground littered with corpses. Everyone keep up, don't fall behind. Remember what Marquis said before. Daluan Ruozhen is very smart and good at calculation. From the moment we attacked the sentry tower, he was quickly calculating our position. We must never, ever stay in one place. Huang Batian said harshly. This operation was led by Li Sai, but everyone knew that the real mastermind behind this was definitely not Li Sai, but Wang Chong, who was far away in the military camp. Understood, everyone responded. In this night raid against the Uzun army, the Uzun army had fallen into an extremely passive position. Perhaps not even Daluan Ruozhen knew that he had fallen completely into Wang Chong's control. The rhythm of this battle, whether it was the feint or the final attack, as well as Daluan Ruozhen's calculating abilities, had all been calculated by Wang Chong. Perhaps not even Daluan Ruozhen knew that he had already lost this battle. Kill! A few moments later, a heaven-shaking battle cry resounded through the air once more, but this time, it came from a place nearly 1,000 feet away from the sentry tower. If one paid attention, they would discover that Huang Batian and the others didn't randomly choose a place to attack. Each place was extremely far away and seemed to follow some sort of pattern, and if one looked down from a higher vantage point, they would discover that the entire Uzun camp was filled with battle cries that seemed to be connected to each other. Meanwhile, behind the hills, next to the Uzun commander's tent, Daluan Ruozhen was kneeling on one knee, his slender finger constantly moving. His brow was tightly furrowed and his lips were moving, a sharp light constantly flashing through his eyes. Ever since the battle began, all sorts of information had been pouring in from all directions. Every time a location was attacked, Daluan Ruozhen would make a mark on the map of the camp. The entire map of the campsite was already densely packed with markings, and these markings were constantly increasing. Daluan Ruozhen was half squatting there motionless, but his mind was rapidly calculating. At this time, even the celestial wolf Great General de Wuxia was quietly standing behind him, not disturbing him. The ability that Daluan Ruozhen had displayed was astonishing even to someone like de Wuxia. From the perspective of martial arts, Daluan Ruozhen's intellect was insignificant, but his strength was reflected in an even higher level of difficulty that ordinary people could only look up to. In the realm of intelligence, the role of force was negligible, but the role of intelligence was decisive. In this realm of strategy, Daluan Ruozhen was unquestionably the greatest general. Found it! A sharp light suddenly flashed through Daluan Ruozhen's eyes. Daluan Ruozhen raised his head, his furrowed brow finally relaxing. Someone! Call General Huoba Senji over. Have him bring his troops here immediately. Clang! Daluan Ruozhen suddenly pulled out the long sword at his waist and stabbed it deeply into the northeast corner of the map. Wang Chong, I've underestimated you, but this round is far from over. The wind whistled. Daluan Ruozhen stood in front of the tent, his robes fluttering in the wind, his eyes bursting with a startling light. He could now basically determine Wang Chong's plan. More than 20 small teams were feints, constantly harassing and confusing his judgment. But the real main force was actually at the northeast corner. Daluan Ruozhen could even determine that the main force of this night attack would definitely be a considerable number of Wuxian cavalry. Without this level of strength, it would be impossible to complete this night attack. And the one who could command these Wuxian cavalry was probably only that fierce general of the Tang dynasty called Li Sai. As long as Huoba Senji and the Mutri Great Cavalry were sent over, they would be able to wipe out the night attack in one fell swoop and completely change the situation of the Uzun in this battle. Huoba Senji, remember, advance in this direction. You must not let them discover you and outflank them. I want you to wipe them all out in one fell swoop. In the dark night, a burly figure appeared in front of Daluan Ruozhen. Looking at Huoba Senji, Daluan Ruozhen stretched out his right hand and suddenly pulled out the longsword on the ground. He drew an S-shaped curve on the map of the camp on the ground. Understood. Hwaba Senji lowered his head and glanced at it. Then, he quickly turned around and disappeared into the darkness. Prime Minister, I'll go too. A vigorous voice suddenly came from behind. Wuxia took a step forward and suddenly spoke. After a few moments of hesitation, Dalawan Ruozen nodded. In this clash, Yusang had already lost the initiative. Only a thunderous move could reverse the tide and reverse the tide. Vish! In a flash of light, Wuxia vanished into the darkness. As the three Uzun generals and the Western Turkic Great General vanished into the darkness, accompanied by the departure of the Mutri Great Cavalry and Hwaba Senji, an invisible killing intent slowly unfurled in the sky and began to strike back at the Tang dynasty's night attack. Dalawan Ruozen's intelligence was far more unfathomable than the average person could imagine. Even though there was no evidence that the camp in the northeast corner had suffered a large-scale attack, and no news had been sent, Dalawan Ruozen's judgment was correct. But Dalawan Ruozen's judgment was correct. At this moment, the northeastern corner of the Tibetan camp was filled with the glint of swords and the light of fire, signs of a fierce battle. If one looked carefully, one would see thick smoke and the corpses of thousands of Uzun soldiers strewn across the ground. In the center of this camp was a force of more than 4,000 elite Tang soldiers, all of them wearing the armor of the Uzun people. They had assumed various battle formations and were charging forward, engaging in repeated slaughter. Wherever the army passed, men and horses were thrown off their feet, and all the Uzun soldiers were cut down like weeds. Messengers, generals, and officers of all ranks, all the Uzun soldiers involved in the transmission of information, were the main targets of these attacks. Thus, despite the intensity of the battle and its scale, the news had not been able to get out in time. Everyone hear my order. Pass on my order. After 10 breaths, all soldiers are to retreat. In the center of the army, Li Sai's loud and clear voice resounded through the sky. Before his voice faded away, Li Sai grasped the Wuxia steel sword with both hands and fiercely slashed forward. Boom! With an earth-shattering boom, a magnificent sword chi of more than 10 zhang long streaked across the sky and landed heavily on the densely packed Uzun cavalry that was charging over. Amid the shrill screams, the powerful chi exploded. More than 10 Uzun cavalrymen and their horses were sent flying into the sky like kites with their strings cut. 5 or 6 Uzun cavalrymen were directly cut in half by Li Sai's sword chi, and their blood splattered over a radius of 10 zhang. In the face of a top expert like Li Sai, this so-called army of the Uzun was too weak. Kill! In the dark night, battle cries rose to the sky. Countless Uzun soldiers surged over from all directions. One army charged past Li Sai about 20 zhang away and disappeared into the darkness in the distance. Another army fought side by side with Li Sai's ally, charging towards the Uzun army on the opposite side. Both sides fought fiercely. The Uzun armor worn by Li Sai's army played a key role. In the dark, the Uzun people could only hear the battle cries, but they could not tell the difference between friend and foe. Originally, the Uzun people were shorter than the Central Plainsmen, and they could still be distinguished from their stature. However, the Uzun army brought by Dalawan Ruozen were all the elites of the elites. Compared to the ordinary Uzun people, they were much taller and stronger. Basically, they were no different from the Han people, and it was impossible to tell the difference just from their stature. The Uzun people had the unique redness of the plateau on their cheeks, which could not be seen in the dark at all. Even the faces of the Tang dynasty army, which was illuminated by the light of the bonfire, also showed a redness of the plateau. Chapter 943. But despite his unstoppable momentum, Li Sai did not relax in the slightest. On the contrary, his expression grew even more solemn and nervous. Remember, in this night raid against Dalawan Ruozen, you can't be the slightest bit careless. Even if you have the cover from the catapults, even if you have the armor of the Uzun soldiers, and even if you have 20-some teams to harass and confuse his judgment, given Dalawan Ruozen's abilities, You won't be able to delay him for too long. Moreover, the Izan and Western Turks still have 3 great generals. So once the time is up, you must immediately retreat without the slightest hesitation. As the winds howled around him, Li Sai recalled the words Wang Chong had repeatedly warned him before the operation. In a battle between experts, every second mattered, and between top-class strategists like Wang Chong and Dalawan Ruozan, every second could mean a completely different result. A battle of wits and schemes was different from a battle of martial arts. There was no smoke of gunpowder, no fierce glints of swords, but it was far more dangerous. In a battle of martial arts, whether one won or lost, the most casualties would be one person, perhaps several dozen or even 100. But a battle of wits and schemes would often result in the deaths of thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions. This was something that no martial arts could compare to. In this battle of wits and schemes, not even a general like Li Sai could interfere. All he could do was faithfully and perfectly carry out Wang Chong's every step and decision. Nay, war horses neighed as Li Sai led his army through the Izan camp. In a few short moments, wave after wave of Uzan soldiers fell to the iron hooves of the Tang dynasty. But when the battle was at its most intense, Li Sai glanced at the sky and immediately gave an order. Retreat! With a loud roar, more than 4,000 elites of the Tang dynasty, as well as more than 20 squads scattered in different parts of the Uzan camp, seemed to have sensed something in advance. Abruptly, they pulled the reins and rushed towards the second defense line of the Tang dynasty. This action was so sudden that the Uzan people behind them were all dumbstruck, and none of them could say a word. After him. A moment later, these people finally reacted and chased after him, cutting formation. However, in the distance, Li Sai and the others seemed to have expected this. With a cutting formation, they turned around and killed all the Uzan people who were chasing after them. Only then did they continue to retreat to the Tang dynasty's camp. Boom! Almost not long after Li Sai and the others left, smoke and dust billowed, and an army wearing gold and red armors flew out of the flames. Damn it! I was a step too late. Huoba Senji clenched his fists and clenched his teeth as he stared in the direction of the Tang army's retreat. Following Dalawan Ruozan's orders, he had done his best to circle around and charge over. But the Tang people had apparently predicted this and retreated first. This made Huoba Senji feel like he had punched nothing but air, and his heart ached. "My lord, what do we do?" a Mutri great horseman asked. Huoba Senji said nothing, a pensive look in his eyes. According to Dalawan Ruozan's plans, they should have been engaged in fierce battle with the enemy, but there was no doubt that Dalawan Ruozan's calculations had been off, and he needed to make a decision for himself. Buzz! Just as he was deep in thought, a strange feeling suddenly appeared in his heart. Huoba Senji suddenly turned his head, only to see an enormous aura rapidly approaching from the northwest. Before the person had even gotten close, an astonishing howl had already entered everyone's ears like rolling thunder. "This is the celestial wolf great general of the Western Turks." Huoba Senji's pupils constricted in recognition, but Dewissely clearly did not notice them. With a howl, he and his horse shot past the Mutri great cavalry like a bolt of lightning, vanishing into the darkness. "Where do you think you're going?" In the distance, they could still hear Dewissely's furious roar. "Let's go. Let's pursue him together." Huoba Senji's eyes flashed as he quickly came up with an idea. More than 5,000 Mutri great iron cavalry gave chase as fast as lightning. "General, what do we do?" "It's the celestial wolf great general of the Western Turks," a Wuxiang horseman suddenly said, a nervous look in his eyes. Dewissely's shout could be heard even from a great distance. More importantly, everyone could sense the powerful storm of energy coming from Dewissely's body, rapidly advancing like a bolt of lightning. At this speed, it would only take a few moments for Dewissely to catch up. For a top-class imperial great general to charge into their ranks would be an unimaginable disaster. "There's no need to worry." Li Sai only smiled, his expression relaxed. Marquis predicted all of this. "Everyone, proceed according to the plan." Before his voice faded away, Li Sai suddenly squeezed the horse's abdomen and accelerated forward. "Oomph! Do you think you can escape? Behind him, Dewussely rode his mighty Turkic steed through the darkness, his eyes blazing with a fierce light. If one looked carefully, one would see that his eyes were bursting with rage. Dewussely had set off right behind Huobasenji. But unlike Huobasenji, Dewussely did not need to take a roundabout route. With his great general strength, he should have been able to get there first. But reality was the complete opposite. When Dewussely emerged from the Uzun commander's tent, he saw that his camp was ablaze. At some point, Wang Chong's catapult square had targeted his western Turkic camp, and all sorts of information was being sent to him. He had even received news that the Uzun had attacked his camp, and that the two sides had even begun to fight. Although Dewussely was in a hurry to deal with the Tang raiding in the night, he could not remain indifferent to this sort of news. But by the time he got there, all the stone catapults had vanished, and all the urgent reports had vanished. All that was left was the news of the conflict between the Western Turks and the Tibetans. Dewussely immediately felt like he had been made a fool of. As one of the best great generals of the Western Turkic Khaganate, Dewussely had never suffered such a humiliation, which was why he had come out in such a furious manner. No matter where you run, only death awaits you. Dewussely's killing intent surged into the heavens. To Dewussely, exterminating this Tang dynasty army of 4,000 to 5,000 was as easy as turning over his hand. But as Dewussely was galloping forward, the 4,000 to 5,000 Tang dynasty cavalry suddenly scattered like birds and beasts. Dewussely's heart skipped a beat. He had never imagined that the Tang raiding army would use this sort of method to scatter and flee in every direction. A single target had instantly become several thousand. Even a great general like Dewussely couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end. Damn it! Dewussely clenched his fists, his entire body about to go crazy with rage. For a moment, he actually didn't know what to do. But soon, Dewussely's eyes flashed with cold light as he chose a tall figure in front of him. I'll kill you first, and then I'll kill the others. Dewussely urged his horse forward, locking onto Li Sai. Li Sai's body was far too imposing and muscular, his 2-meter-tall frame extremely conspicuous in the darkness. In the battle during the day, Dewussely had already deeply remembered this commander of the Wuxian cavalry. If he could kill this sword-wielding commander of the Tang dynasty, he would definitely deal a massive blow to the Tang dynasty cavalry. Die for me! With a fierce roar, Dewussely leaped into the air, man and horse using the celestial wolf's divine procession. From a distance, Dewussely was like a shooting star, pursuing Li Sai with astonishing speed. Even though Li Sai was the commander of the Wuxian cavalry, there was still a massive gap between him and a top-class imperial great general like Celestial Wolf Great General Dewussely. Boom! Before even arriving, Dewussely slashed out with his hand, unleashing a magnificent sword chi more than 100 feet long. Even Li Sai paled in comparison to the power of this attack. Not good. As Li Sai rode on his Fergana horse, he sensed the sharp and fierce energy behind him, and his heart sank. At this moment, Li Sai suddenly sensed an intense aura of death. He had been galloping as fast as he could, but he hadn't expected Dewussely to be even more brilliant than he had expected. The sharpness and speed of this attack made it impossible for him to dodge. However, right when Li Sai was overwhelmed with shock and closed his eyes to await his death, a faint voice suddenly resounded in the night sky, and it revealed a mocking tone. Celestial Wolf Great General, I've been waiting for you for a long time. An enormous energy erupted from nowhere, and before Li Sai could react, a terrifying sword chi at the peak of the Saint Martial realm swept past Li Sai and collided with Dewussely. Rumble! There was a heaven-shaking boom as endless rays of light and sword chi swept through the surroundings, accompanied by fierce gales. Two supreme great generals had collided in the wilderness, and even Li Sai couldn't help but be alarmed by this terrifying collision. Gao Xianji, a thought flitted through Li Sai's mind. In the entire northwest of the Tang dynasty, the only person who could single-handedly contend against a great general like Dewussely was probably Gao Xianji. Damn it! It's you! Chapter 944. The timing of Gao Xianji's appearance had been far too coincidental. From the past until now, de Wuxia had felt like he was being held back at every turn. Although his opponent had been different each time, de Wuxia had always been able to faintly see the same face behind each incident. Whenever he thought of that young figure, de Wuxia couldn't help but feel vexed. Martial strength and intelligence, two completely different strengths, were clashing in a different way. And in this clash, de Wuxia was unquestionably at a disadvantage. De Wuxia, for better or worse, you're still the Erkin of the Western Turks, one of the elite great generals of Mount Sanmi. Don't you think it's beneath your dignity to chase down a general like this? Gao Xianji stood in the darkness, his sword in one hand, and a mocking smile on his face. Gao Xianji, I won't waste my breath. Since you've appeared, I can't be bothered to continue chasing. Let's meet on the battlefield. De Wuxia suppressed the killing intent in his heart, gave a vicious glare, and then galloped off. Battles between great generals were often extremely costly and time-consuming. Since Gao Xianji had appeared, de Wuxia understood that there was no need to continue fighting. Showing no desire to fight, he quickly vanished into the night. Gao Xianji quietly stood there with a smile on his lips. He made no attempt to stop de Wuxia, as he vanished into the distance. My lord, it really was as Wang Chong predicted. The great general sent by Daluan Ruozhen truly was de Wuxia. Not long after de Wuxia left, a voice came from behind him. Cheng Qianli, the vice protector general of the Anxi Protectorate Army, strode forward, his hand pressed to the sword at his waist. Huashi Wuzong and Dusong Mangpoj are both great generals of the Uzhen, and are inextricably linked to Daluan Ruozhen. Their every move is under Daluan Ruozhen's control. Of the entire Uzhen and Western Turkic army, only de Wuxia can chase them out. Gao Xianji faintly smiled. Gao Xianji was an extremely formidable great general in the art of war, and in terms of tactics, he was very similar to Wang Chong. But it was precisely because of this that Gao Xianji felt an increasing appreciation for Wang Chong, a feeling that he regretted not having met him earlier. Gao Xianji had never imagined that the Tang dynasty would have such a person. If he had known about this person, he would have used his status as Anxi Protector General to recruit him to the western regions. If the two of them worked together, the western regions would have been far different from its current state. Let's go. By leaving the camp, we've already given them enough time and opportunity. The Arabs should have already begun their attack. Gao Xianji faintly smiled, and as he spoke, he slowly turned around and began to walk toward the other side of Talas. If one wanted to deal with something, one had to first take it. He had not appeared here just to stop de Wuxia. If one wanted to bait a fish, one had to first give it bait. This was a principle that would never change. On the other side, in the darkness, Huoba Senji and a group of golden-red armored Mutri great cavalry stared at Gao Xianji's back. Although they were filled with reluctance, they had no choice but to suppress it. Withdraw. With this order, the group left as quickly as they had come. Heavens! Plush plush plush. Gao Xianji's judgment had been correct. Back in time, when Gao Xianji had been resisting de Wuxia, arrows had shot out of the darkness, each of them striking the furnaces and torches behind the first defense line. Pung pung pung. There was a series of light explosions, and a burst of stellar energy erupted from the arrows. With a flash of light, the torches were all extinguished, and the originally bright first line of defense was instantly plunged into darkness. Careful! Enemy attack! In the darkness, the Tang dynasty soldiers behind the second defense line immediately reacted. Thish! The vigilant soldier had barely finished speaking when an arrow shot out like a viper, piercing through his neck. The throat of the vigilant Tang dynasty soldier gurgled, and his eyes went wide as he toppled to the ground. Clang clang clang. In a flash of cold light, the Tang dynasty soldiers behind the first defense line began to pull out their swords and sabers, their muscles bulging as they nervously looked beyond the walls. Shield men defend. Use the large shields to block the gap. A voice rang out in the darkness, and the training of the Tang dynasty began to show at this moment. Even though they did not know how many soldiers the other side had, or what kind of soldiers they had, the Tang dynasty generals behind the defense line quickly made the correct response. In a flash, the shieldmen of the Tang dynasty charged toward the gap, the shields in their hands the height of a man slamming down on the gap. At the same time, they leaned forward and took up a defensive stance. No matter how many people the other side had or how they attacked, as long as the Tang dynasty could block the gap, no matter how capable the other side was, they would be powerless. But while the Tang dynasty had reacted quickly, the enemy in the darkness had reacted even faster. Nay! The neighing of a warhorse resounded through the night sky, breaking the silence of the night. In the darkness, a series of earth-shattering roars resounded like landslides and tsunamis. It was unknown how many enemies were approaching the first line of defense. They had been lying in ambush here for an unknown period of time. Only now did they erupt and launch a fierce attack. Kill them! Everyone charge with me! Anyone who disobeys will die. Kill all these Tang people! Rumble! Gales buffeted the steel walls. And in the blink of an eye, thousands of Arab cavalry charged out of the darkness, their eyes bright and fierce. Plush blush. In front of these Arab cavalry, countless arrows rained down like a swarm of locusts. In a flash, countless Tang dynasty soldiers had been shot to the ground. Accompanying this volley of arrows was the attack of the Arab cavalry. Boom! Two huge horseshoes appeared in the darkness, and heavily crashed onto a huge heavy shield at the gap, with a thunderous momentum. The heavy horseshoes and the heavy infantry shields collided fiercely, causing a heavy metal boom that reverberated in the air above the first defense line, which was so loud that it seemed to break people's eardrums. With a groan, the Tang dynasty shieldman behind the heavy shields paled and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, but he had managed to endure this heavy blow. But before he could even catch his breath, a second pair of hooves slammed into the infantry shields, and then a third, a fourth. 5 of the sturdiest Arab warhorses slammed into the heavy shields of the Tang infantrymen. Not even the seasoned Arab infantryman could stop this enormous force. Boom! The Tang infantryman was sent flying along with his shield. The Arab cavalry in the rear swiftly surged forward. Kill! Arab roars shook the heavens. The Arabs had prepared for this ambush for a long time. Whether it was the initial volley of arrows or the cavalry, they were both swift and fierce. Bum bum bum. In a few short moments, countless Arab cavalry had crossed the steel walls and charged into the Tang dynasty positions. Stop them! Light the fires! Even in the face of this chaos, the Tang dynasty generals did not lose their composure. Whoosh! In the distance outside the range of the battle, torches were thrown over. The nearby reinforcements quickly prepared themselves, and in a few short moments, hundreds of torches had been thrown over the battlefield. In the light of the torches, the savage figures of the Arab horsemen could be seen. Up! With a roar, the Tang dynasty soldiers charged at the Arab cavalry, none of them panicking. However, before the surrounding reinforcements could rush over, another wave of unexpected changes occurred. They-ish. With a shrill whistle, a dazzling white arc of light like a bright moon crossed the first defense line, cutting through the necks of the first and second Tang dynasty infantrymen, and flying through the ranks of the Arab soldiers behind the defense line. Another arc of light whistled through the air, followed by a second, a third. In a few short moments, countless arcs of light had emerged from the darkness and recklessly danced through the ranks of the Tang dynasty soldiers. With each arc of light, a Tang dynasty soldier would fall into a pool of blood. These hundreds of arcs of light were both fast and accurate, creating a bloody dance of death in the ranks of the Tang dynasty soldiers. Clang! A Tang dynasty soldier pulled out his sword, and a fierce white sword light flashed through the air, striking the arc of light in the air. Chapter 945. The scimitars used by these soldiers were different from the scimitars used by Arab cavalry. They were extremely thin, only a third of the thickness of an Arab scimitar, but they were far sharper. More importantly, these scimitars had no hilts, requiring a special method to shoot them. Moreover, the scimitars spiraled through the air, signifying that they possessed incredible lethality that could not be blocked. This was how Nerman's Deathwing team had gained its name. Wherever they went, there would be blood and death, as well as countless opponents who would be scared out of their wits. But this powerful force was useless in a regular battle during the day. This was because the range of these special scimitars was very short, far inferior to bows, ballistae and ballistae. Nerman's Deathwing team wouldn't even have a chance to get close before being swept clean. Thus, Nerman's force had always been the last. In the battle during the day, countless Arab cavalry had fallen to the blades of the Tang army. Nerman watched from a distance, wondering how long he had been waiting for this moment of vengeance. As he watched the Tang dynasty soldiers fall like straw, Nerman felt every cell in his body relax with an indescribable joy. Umar was dead, Amor had been defeated, and even Khalid's Iron Beast army had suffered grievous losses. In the end, all this proved that Nerman and his Deathwing army were the most elite force of the Arab East under the governor's command. Even the most formidable Tang people could only tremble and wail under his scimitars. And this time, he had chosen a very special area of attack. It was far from the gates of Talas, at the very back of the first defense line. Even if the Tang dynasty wanted to reinforce them, they would need some time. Retreat! Don't you dare retreat! A voice came from the distance. In the face of this dreadful attack, someone had finally made a wise decision. The Arab attacks were not scary, but those thin, handleless scimitars were far too frightening. There were no weapons that could stop them. The more they attacked these scimitars, the faster they would become, and the more destructive they would be, the more casualties there would be. The surrounding darkness provided the perfect cover for them, making them even more elusive and difficult to defend against. Under such circumstances, retreating was the best option. "Ihi, do you think you can escape?" Although Nerman didn't know the language of the Tang dynasty, he already understood when he saw some of the reinforcements rushing over and retreating. "If you want to escape, you'll have to ask for my permission first." A hint of cruelty flashed in Nerman's eyes. He waved his right hand, and in the next moment, something strange happened again. Shio, 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 amidst the shrill whistling sounds of arrows. One after another, long arrows shot out from the distance like lightning, shooting towards the bright lights in the distance. Pu. As the arrows flew past, the flames were extinguished once again, and darkness descended. Shio! There was an ear-piercing whistle, and a dazzling arc of light descended at an astonishing speed. In the darkness, it was impossible to distinguish what was going on. Only shrill screams could be heard. In an instant, more than 10 Tang dynasty soldiers fell to the ground. "Kill them!" Nerman yelled ferociously. Countless arcs of light shot out. Just as Nerman was about to repeat what he had done and set off another bloody storm, an unexpected change happened. Boom! Suddenly, an earth-shattering sound came from above. Nerman was shocked. In the depths of the darkness, he saw a huge rock, about half the height of a person, tumbling rapidly in the air like a meteorite, smashing in his direction. "What's going on?" Nerman's pupil shrank, and his expression changed. But before he could react, the huge rock had already smashed down. Boom! In the violent explosion, 3 wings of death cavalry standing in the darkness couldn't even dodge in time. With a shrill scream, they were smashed into meat paste together with their horses. The violent shockwaves from the explosion and the countless pieces of rubble sent more than a dozen wings of death cavalrymen flying. Suddenly, too suddenly, Nerman had never imagined that he would encounter such an unexpected attack. But this was far from over. Boom boom boom. Boulder after boulder came crashing down like a torrential rain, and the entire Deathwing team was caught in the middle of this rain of rocks. Damn it! How could something like this happen? Let alone the wings of death. Even Nerman was struck dumb by this wave of attacks. "Retreat! Hurry and retreat!" Nerman's shrill Arabic voice echoed through the darkness. What had just happened had far surpassed his imagination. It was common knowledge that the greatest flaw of catapults was their poor accuracy. They could deviate by several hundred meters, or even more. But now that night had fallen and he couldn't see anything, the enemy could control the catapults to accurately attack him. The scimitars of the Deathwing team were useless against this sort of attack, so they could only choose to retreat. In Nay, warhorses neighed in panic. The Deathwing team, which had originally held the upper hand, was instantly thrown into chaos by the rain of rocks. All of them were forced to turn their horses around and retreat. Let's see how much skill you have. In a place where Nerman couldn't see, Chen Burang was standing on a large steel catapult sneering. These steel catapults had all been modified by Zhang Shouji, with a 30-meter-long telescopic frame that allowed them to throw even farther. Most importantly, they were all equipped with large steel wheels that gave them a certain degree of mobility on the battlefield. Pass on my order. Smash. Give me a vicious smash. Adjust the direction by 10 scales. Do you think that retreating is enough? How childish. Chen Burang sneered. He had finished his mission and was retreating to Talas when he heard the sounds of activity in the distance. Having grown up in the depths of the mountains, Chen Burang had a pair of extraordinary ears. Just by listening to the sound, he was able to pinpoint the exact location of his opponent. Nerman's attack might be able to fool ordinary people, but it couldn't fool him. Not even Nerman's elite Deathwing team would be able to withstand a rock half the height of a man thrown down from the sky by a steel catapult. Being struck by a rock thrown by a catapult meant certain death. The pitch-black darkness not only provided cover for Nerman, but also for Chen Burang's catapults. By the time Nerman's Deathwing team noticed, these massive rocks were already very close to them. Even if they wanted to dodge, there was no time. Boom boom boom. Explosions rang out in the darkness as Nerman's Deathwing team was forced into a passive position. Change the direction. Adjust the scale by 30. Bring those master archers into range as well. Chen Burang waved his arm and gave another order. His ears had not only heard Nerman and his Deathwing team, but also the location of the Arab archers. Although these archers were not aiming at the Tang people, the torches and furnaces they had extinguished were no less damaging to the army than Nerman. Boom boom boom. In the distance, explosions and screams could be heard from the Arab camp. Chen Burang's rain of stone catapults forced the archers to retreat once more. Cree. Suddenly, an ear-piercing shriek came from Talas. This shriek was neither fierce nor loud, and it was easily drowned out by the fierce battlefield. However, a smile crept onto Chen Burang's lips when he heard the shriek. Enough! It's enough to teach them a lesson. Everyone hear my order. Protect the catapults, and immediately return to the city. Chen Burang said. But my lord, are we not going to care about those Arabs attacking us? One of Chen Burang's soldiers asked. There's no need. Didn't you hear that cry? Our mission is complete. As for what comes next, Marquis has already made arrangements. Those Arabs are dead for sure. Chen Burang chuckled, a derisive smile on his lips. He had never doubted Master Ho's orders. Since Master Ho did not allow him to intervene and asked him to withdraw, then the matter was settled. Those people would definitely die. Let's go. Massive catapults rumbled through the air as they flew toward the city of Talas. Around them, there were thousands of soldiers guarding them. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Nerman's entire body was burning with rage, his lungs about to explode. His Deathwing team's formation had been thrown into disarray by the catapults, and it had lost all of its strength. Everyone hear my order. Hurry and regroup. After fighting on the continent for so long, Nerman's wings of death had killed countless enemies, creating mountains of corpses and seas of blood. That was how he had earned his current reputation, but he had never encountered such a grievance. No one can force us to this state. Kill for me. For every one of our deaths, I'll make the Tang dynasty pay 10, perhaps even more, to accompany us in death. In the darkness, the sound of hooves could be heard as Nerman quickly gathered his troops and regrouped. Vengeance was a principle in the hearts of all Arabs. Just when Nerman was preparing to launch another counterattack against the Tang people, in a flash of light, a blazing fire arrow shot through the air and struck the ground in front of Nerman. The weak light of the fire illuminated the stunned faces of the Deathwing soldiers. Nerman's heart clenched as he felt an extremely ill foreboding. Chapter 946. As the darkness receded, the mysterious Arab raiding army was revealed for the first time. The warhorses neighed. Under the illumination of the flames, a bearded Wings of Death soldier subconsciously covered his eyes with his arms and retreated. The Deathwing team was used to hiding in the darkness, ambushing and attacking their opponents. They were extremely unaccustomed to the sudden appearance of these flames. In truth, it wasn't just this bearded Arab soldier. All the Wings of Death soldiers showed signs of panic when they saw the flames. Damn it! Hurry and extinguish those torches. Nerman's heart tightened as he instinctively sensed danger. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. The enemy commander had apparently found a way to deal with him, and his long experience in battle made him sense the approaching danger. Retreat! Nerman raised his arm to give the order to retreat, but it was too late. The enemy commander was far more formidable than he had imagined. Boom! The bowstring vibrated, the air exploded, and a thick crossbow bolt, more than 3 meters long, shot out from behind the first defense line in an instant, piercing through a Wings of Death warrior. The Wings of Death warrior didn't even have time to scream before he was pierced through by the arrow. Along with his horse, a huge bloody hole appeared in his body, and he instantly died. The ballista bolt continued onward, piercing through the bodies of 6 more Wings of Death soldiers, before vanishing into the darkness. The Tang Dynasty ballistae. This thought flitted through Nerman's mind, and his face instantly turned as white as a sheet of paper. He had already seen ballista bolts fired during the day's battle. Every time they were fired, it was like the roar of the god of death. In this night raid, he had deliberately avoided the defensive zone of the Tang Dynasty ballistae, but the ballistae had still managed to arrive in time. Run! Nerman was no longer just nervous but panicked. The range of the Tang Dynasty ballistae was far greater than that of the scimitars controlled by the Wings of Death, and they were also much more powerful. In a direct confrontation, his Deathwing team had no chance of victory against these treasured weapons of the Tang Dynasty. To put it simply, the ballistae of the Tang Dynasty were the bane of the Wings of Death. Retreat! 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 Nerman said the word retreat 3 times in a row, and without thinking, he hurriedly ran away. Behind him, the countless Wings of Death soldiers also began to flee. But the Tang Dynasty had prepared for this moment for a long time. So how could they let them run so easily? If they didn't kill them, Nerman and his Wings of Death would stir up more carnage and kill more Tang people. Boom! 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 Thick and long ballista bolts were shot from all directions like a rainstorm, concentrating on the fleeing Wings of Death soldiers. No matter how fast the warhorses were, how could they be faster than the ballista bolts? With a series of earth-shattering noises and thunderous roars in the air, the previously invincible Deathwing team fell like weeds before they could escape far. Bang! 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 In a split second, countless cavalrymen of the Wings of Death fell to the ground in disorder. The neighing of horses' screams, the sound of heavy objects falling, and the roar of ballista bolts filled the night sky. The strong smell of blood quickly pervaded the air. The originally one-sided situation of this war was quickly reversed. The battlefield that was originally dominated by Nerman and the Wings of Death, after the appearance of the Tang Dynasty ballistae, quickly turned into a situation where the Tang Dynasty completely crushed and dominated. Release! 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 In the distance, the armored Chun Bin swung down his arm, unleashing wave after wave of ballista bolts, reaping the lives of the fleeing Arabs. I'd like to see how far you can run. Chun Bin's expression was as cold and determined as steel. These Arabs were far too cunning, and their attacks far too terrifying. In a few short moments, the soldiers behind the steel defense line had suffered grievous losses. There was no doubt that this was an elite force, one that was extremely skilled in night raids. Whether it was the rain of ballista bolts to extinguish the flames, or the deliberate act of luring the Arabs over, so that they could harvest them with their scimitars, they had all been meticulously planned out. Anyone who could do this was definitely not an ordinary elite. But it was precisely for this reason that Chun Bin could not allow them to escape. Release! 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 Chun Bin's expression was cold, his eyes devoid of emotion. He stared at the cavalrymen of the wings of death in the distance as he swung his arm again and again. Chen Bin was the true commander of the ballista army. He had single-handedly built up this army of more than 10,000 ballista soldiers from scratch. In his hands, the ballista army could display its greatest might. Not even Suki could compare to him in this aspect. Boom, boom, boom. Bolt after bolt of crossbow bolts shot out like bolts of lightning, chasing after the soul. With each ballista bolt, a large number of wings of death cavalry were felled. But Chen Bin's eyes were fixed on one person. Ballistae had an extremely long range. Although they were not as powerful as catapults, in Chen Bin's hands, they were far too easy to deal with a single person. It's too late to think about running now. Chen Bin stood on the transport carriage, his eyes fixed on Nerman's fleeing figure, a sharp killing intent flashing through his eyes. After killing so many Tang people, he was delusional if he thought he could escape unscathed. 10 steps, 9 steps, 8 steps, 7 steps. Just as he silently counted to 1, Chen Bin's right arm suddenly swung down heavily in the void. Second team fire. His final order was earth-shattering. Following Chen Bin's order, 60 or 70 ballistae appeared behind Chen Bin. All of them aimed at Nerman. The ballistae groaned as they loaded their ballistae bolts and shot forward like flood dragons. Not good, Nerman grimaced. Although his back was to the first defense line, and he couldn't see anything. The moment the ballista bolts shot out, Nerman instinctively sensed an intense danger. His skin stood on end, his scalp prickling, and his pores began to exude a cold chi. In all his years of campaigning on the continent, all his battles, and all his enemies, Nerman had never felt such a terrifying sense of danger before. Boom! A series of thunderous booms came from behind him, and they were rapidly approaching him from behind at an astonishing speed. Go! There was no time to think. In a flash, Nerman leapt off the horse's back. Arabia was a country of cavalry, and it was unimaginable for a general to not have a mount, but Nerman couldn't worry about such things. Boom! There was a loud bang, and the horse neighed. Just as Nerman leapt out, more than 20 thick black crossbow bolts shot out from all directions, piercing holes in Nerman's horse and nailing it to the ground. Nerman felt a chill run down his spine, but even so, Nerman had not been able to avoid danger. This time, Chen Bin had personally led the attack, and the ballista bolts had taken into account every possible escape route. 70 to 80 ballista bolts had sealed off every possible escape route. No matter which direction he tried, he would never be able to escape. Boom, boom, boom. Just as Nerman leapt away, at least 17 or 18 crossbow bolts shot at him from behind and smashed into his back. Nerman had no time to think. He only had time to unleash all the stellar energy in his body before he was struck by all the ballista bolts. Ah! There was a scream as Nerman's stellar energy flickered several times. Although he had successfully blocked all the ballista bolts, he had still been sent flying by the immense power of the ballista bolts. Phew! Whoosh! Just as Nerman was sent flying, a warhorse neighed in the darkness, and a muscular figure galloped over on a warhorse from afar. Shi Yuanqing of the Tang dynasty is here. Hand over your life. Boom! There was a heaven-shaking boom, and then all was quiet. At almost the same moment that Shi Yuanqing suppressed Nerman, a massive explosion came from the distant Arab camp. Shouts and fighting filled the air as countless Arabs emerged from the blazing flames. This night raid lasted until almost daybreak before calming down. Only when the elites of the Anxi Protectorate army responsible for raiding the Arabs returned did this night truly come to an end. In the Lord's Hall of the city of Talas, a hot pot was roaring and torches were blazing on the walls. The bright yellow light of these torches flickered on the faces of the people in the hall. Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, Li Sai, Chen Bin, Shi Yuanqing, Huang Batian, and all the other soldiers who had participated in the night raid were gathered here. Even Banahan Chief Banahan and the new Karluk Chief Guli were present. Everyone was gathered in this hall, and the atmosphere was somber. How is it? Gao Xianji first turned to Li Sai, who was standing next to Wang Chong. In this operation, Wang Chong and Gao Xianji had been responsible for the Uzun and Arabs respectively, not interfering with each other's operations. But now that the battle was over, it was time to assess the gains and losses. Sun Jiming and Cheng Sanyuan were both discovered by Daluan Ruozhen ahead of time, so none of the three teams suffered any casualties. However, we still ran into some trouble in the Uzun camp. Several of our teams were blocked, and we lost around 60 to 70 men. Li Sai sternly said. They had made ample preparations for this night raid, even wearing the armor of the Uzun soldiers to confuse their foes. But they had still lost 60 to 70 men. This was how war was. No matter how careful one was, casualties were inevitable. Gao Xianji nodded. Chapter 947. At least 6 or 7,000. Li Sai said. It was impossible to accurately calculate the number of casualties in the Uzun camp, so this was only an estimate. But even so, the fact that the 4,000-strong raiding force had managed to kill 6 or 7,000, while only losing 60 to 70 of their own, could be considered a great success. Not bad. This means that the Uzun and the Western Turkic Khaganate should only have 60,000 some left, leaving less and less room for Daluan Ruozhen to maneuver. I'm confident that from now on, he'll be more and more careful in his movements. Gao Xianji gave a satisfied nod. Wang Chong and Gao Xianji had a very clear goal in this raid against the Uzun. They wanted to effectively kill the enemy's strength and constantly whittle down the number of soldiers under Daluan Ruozhen's command. In this aspect, Wang Chong and his raiding force had achieved their goal. What about Lord Gao? Wang Chong asked. Just as Gao Xianji didn't know the exact situation on Wang Chong's side, Wang Chong didn't know what Gao Xianji was doing. Only Gao Xianji and Cheng Qianli, the two highest commanders of the Anqi Protectorate Army, knew the details, including the casualties. Haha, this operation was just as you expected. Abu Muslim really wasn't on his guard. He was too confident, so confident that he believed that with more than 200,000 soldiers, we wouldn't dare to attack him. Thus, this operation was much easier. Gao Xianji smiled at these words. Perhaps it wasn't just that he was too confident, but that he believed that even if we succeeded, it wouldn't have much of an impact on the overall situation, that it wouldn't matter at all. Wang Chong faintly smiled. This isn't about the overall situation. If Abu Muslim really thinks this way, then he's gravely mistaken. Gao Xianji turned his head around and looked at an assistant general behind him. Huai Shun, have the Arab hunting falcons settled down? How many did you get this time? My lord, everything has been arranged. There are a total of 3 hunting falcons. They've all been given to the eagle trainers in the army. The Anqi Deputy General Kong Huaishuan respectfully replied. Are the follow-up measures in place? Will it arouse suspicion? Gao Xianji said. According to my lord's orders, we have already taken care of the corpses of 3 rock eagles that look very similar to Arabian hunting falcons, and left them in the Arab camp. All that was left of the rock eagles were minced meat and feathers. They looked very much like hunting falcons. If the Arabs weren't careful, they wouldn't be able to tell. Moreover, the people who raided the camp reported that the Arabs had many hunting falcons. The loss of only 3 hunting falcons shouldn't attract their attention, Kong Huaishuan said sincerely. Kong Huaishuan was also a renowned general of the Anqi Protectorate Army, and he had been tasked with carrying out this night raid. Wang Chong listened on the side and secretly nodded. The primary goal of the Anqi Protectorate Army's mission to the Arab camp was not to kill the Arabs, but to capture the fierce Arabian hunting falcons. Daluan Ruozhen used these ferocious Arabian hunting falcons to communicate with the Arabs. If they could successfully steal these Arabian hunting falcons, they could cut off the communication between the Arabs and Daluan Ruozhen. But there's another problem. The Arabian hunting falcons have fierce temperaments. They've been screaming ever since they returned from the Arab camp. Our men have done everything we can to quiet them down. Moreover, they're not willing to eat the meat we feed them. Kong Huaishuan said. If the hunting falcons couldn't be tamed, they couldn't be used. Even capturing them would be useless. This problem is easy to solve. Wang Chong gave a carefree smile. General Kong, I have a falcon tamer under my command called Jean Quebec. He has done a great deal of research on Arabian falcons, so leave this matter to him. Huai Shun, let's do as Lord Wang says. Gao Xianji faintly smiled and said. In addition, leave that Nerman, the Arab general who launched the night raid to Protector General Wang. Oh! Wang Chong's eyes brightened in surprise. He had believed that Shi Yuan had killed Nerman. He hadn't expected that Shi Yuan would keep him alive. Then I'll have to thank you. Now that the battle was imminent, Wang Chong's great Yinyang heaven creation art would grow stronger with every person it absorbed. This would be even more helpful in the upcoming battle. Yes. Kong Huaishuan bowed his head and left. Lord Gao. Lord Wang. At this moment Guli, who had been silent this entire time, suddenly spoke. There's another matter. Guli's expression was nervous, and he hesitated. This action quickly attracted the attention of everyone in the hall. Even Wang Chong and the Fergan-in-Chief Banahan turned to look. What's wrong, Guli? Gao Xinji said in surprise. During the Arab raid, a group of soldiers climbed over the walls and sneaked into the city. They secretly contacted our Karluk tribe and mentioned this matter. Guli stammered, his expression revealing great apprehension. The mood in the hall instantly turned strange. Although Guli had not said what this matter was, everyone immediately understood that the Arabs clearly did not know that Wanha Peluo had been killed, and the Karluk tribe had been exposed. Moreover, they had even sent someone to secretly contact them. Lord Protector Generals, our Karluk tribe truly has no intention of rebelling. Lord Protector Generals, please understand, Guli sincerely said. Guli, there's no need to panic. We believe in you. Gao Xianji comforted, calming Guli down with these words. Many thanks, my lord, Guli gratefully said. On the surface, they had sent the Deathwing team to attack the Tang Dynasty army behind the first defense line. But in reality, they had secretly sent someone to contact the Karluk tribe in the city. No one had expected this. The fact that Guli had mentioned this matter was enough to prove his sincerity toward the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong, what do you think of this matter? Gao Xinji said. Wang Chong said nothing. Only a faint smile appeared on his lips. The bright light of the torches shone on his face, making Wang Chong exude a unique aura. Since the Arabs are in such a rush, what harm is there in agreeing? Wang Chong asked with a smile. Everyone in the hall froze for a moment, and then they couldn't help but smile. This night was bound to be a restless one. While the city of Talas was ablaze with lanterns elsewhere, the Izan and the Western Turks had gathered together. But unlike in the city of Talas, the mood here was much more somber. All the Izan generals responsible for sentry posts were standing, their faces fearful and silent. On this night, the entire Izan camp had been turned upside down by the nearly 1,000 Tang people. Even though they had set up so many sentry posts and patrolling soldiers, no one knew where the Tang people had first attacked. And even though the battle was over, no one knew. This was a complete disgrace. All of you carefully think about it. Did you really not discover anything? Dalawan Ruozan sat down on a chair and looked at the Izan generals. His voice was flat and gentle, devoid of any anger, but the Izan generals in the tent lowered their heads in unease. Bastard! There was a thunderous roar. While Dalawan Ruozan was not angry, Huashu Wazong could not help but explode. On this night, all of Yusang had been toyed with in the palm of Wang Chong's hand. No one had been able to answer even a simple question, causing Huashu Huaitsong's rage to erupt. Huashu, you can't blame them for this. That person isn't someone they can fight against. He planned for so long before taking action, so he must have made thorough preparations. He wouldn't have left us too many clues. Dalawan Ruozan comforted. He had never been an impatient person, but his slightly furrowed brow betrayed his thoughts. It was clear that he, like Huashu Wazong, also found it difficult to let go of this matter. It wasn't that Izan couldn't fail, but it couldn't fail without knowing how. Prime Minister. At this moment, a series of hurried footsteps came from outside the tent. The curtain was lifted, and an Izan orderly with a machete on his waist barged in from outside. As soon as he saw them, he immediately knelt on one knee. We were patrolling outside and found something. It seems to be left behind by the Tang people. What is it? Dalawan Ruozan raised his eyebrows and said. At the same time, the others also looked over. It's some wolf skins, the orderly said while kneeling on the ground. Buzz! As soon as he said that, Huashi Wuzong and the others did not react, but Dalawan Ruozan was shocked. In a flash, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Bring me there. Dalawan Ruozan stood up from his seat without hesitation. A few moments later, several hundred zhang away from a sentry post, Dalawan Ruozan, Huashi Wuzong, Dusong Mangpoj, Dewusili, and the other generals arrived at the site of the incident. Dalawan Ruozan's reputation, strict orders, and strict training had proved effective. The moment these things were discovered, the surrounding Uzan soldiers did not move on their own. Instead, they left everything behind and waited for Dalawan Ruozan to deal with them. Are they all here? Dalawan Ruozan asked. His brow was tightly furrowed as he stared at the massive wolf skins on the ground, his expression very unsightly. Around him, Huashi Wuzong and Dusong Mangpoj also had unsightly expressions. Even Dewusili had the same expression. Replying to Prime Minister, there are still some wolf skins scattered in other places, but the majority of them are here. A low-ranking Uzan officer explained. Our people didn't pay much attention at the start, but after the battle ended, we realized that something was wrong. All the wolf skins scattered on the ground are empty. There's no bone, no flesh, not even a drop of blood. They've all been cleaned up. This isn't normal at all. Chapter 948. This bastard. The first to speak was not Dalawan Ruozan, Huashi Wuzong, or Dusong Mangpoj but Dewusili, who had little to do with this night raid. No matter how slow he was, he could still understand that in this night battle, they had been completely tricked by that boy of the Tang dynasty called Wang Chong. Moreover, if his guess was right, the method he had used for this sneak attack was probably related to the Turks. With a long sigh, Dalawan Ruozan looked at the wolf pelts on the ground, an indescribable feeling in his heart. This battle had been going on for most of the night, and he had been in a daze the entire time, unable to understand what had happened. But at this moment, when he saw the discarded wolf pelts, Dalawan Ruozan suddenly understood. I've lost. I had predicted the beginning of this operation, but I didn't expect it to end. I didn't think that he would even be able to use the beasts brought by Great General Dewusili. I wholeheartedly accept my loss this time. Huashi Wuzong couldn't bear to hear these words. Prime Minister, the truth still hasn't come to light. Perhaps these wolf pelts have nothing to do with the Tang dynasty, and it was just a coincidence. Huashi Wuzong consoled. Do you still not understand? Dalawan Ruozan shook his head and stopped Huashi Wuzong. Once he successfully infiltrated this place, he could have taken these wolf pelts with him. The reason he left them here was to make me understand his method of victory. He wanted to use this method to strike a blow at me. The matter was already clear. Dalawan Ruozan had spent so much effort, setting up so many sentries and patrols, and had even laid down secret signals, warning his subordinates to be certain of any allies before allowing them to approach. But all of these methods had failed. Dalawan Ruozan had only thought of guarding against people, but he hadn't thought that he would have to guard against wolves as well. Not even if he was beaten to death could he have imagined that Wang Chong would have his several thousand soldiers disguise themselves as Western Turkic wolves and infiltrate his camp. He wholeheartedly accepted his loss in this battle. He's just a cowardly and shameless bandit. Why did the Prime Minister make him sound so powerful? Dewusili gritted his teeth. At this moment, the one who was the most embarrassed was none other than him. These giant green wolves were brought over by him from the grassland. The Turks had as many of these wolves as they wanted, so he wouldn't feel any heartache if they died. He had brought these giant wolves here to restrain the Tang dynasty, but Dewusili had never imagined that in the end, these giant wolves would be used by Wang Chong as a crucial weapon against Dalawan Ruozan. Dewusili was the Erkin of the Western Turkic Khaganate, one of the best imperial great generals. How could Wuxia possibly endure being toyed with by a nameless Tang dynasty youth? Dalawan Ruozan said nothing, and neither did the others. They naturally understood what Wuxia was thinking, but they couldn't blame him at a time like this. It could only be said that when the righteous rose 1 foot, the evil rose 10. Wang Chong's methods were far too strange and unfathomable. Even someone like Dalawan Ruozan would find it difficult to deal with this sort of person. Cloud and Gongbu, how many people did we lose in this night raid? Dalawan Ruozan suddenly asked. Nearly 7,000. One of the stalwart generals at Dalawan Ruozan's side loudly said. Dalawan Ruozan said nothing, but the air around him had become extremely heavy. On the side, Huashu Wuzong's brow was deeply furrowed. 7,000 casualties were insignificant on the scale of a major campaign. Even for a night raid, it wasn't much. But for the army of the Uzun and Western Turks, which only had 6,000 to 7,000 soldiers, and was severely lacking in manpower, this was undoubtedly a massive blow. He's coming for our soldiers, Huashu Wuzong suddenly said. As a great general of the Uzun Empire, Huashu Wuzong instantly understood his strategic intentions. If everything goes as expected, he will continue to attack us in the future, making us his primary target. The fewer soldiers we have, the more restrained we will be, and the less of a threat we will be able to pose to him. In the end, the ones who will be stuck between a rock and a hard place won't be him, but us. Moreover, whether we know it or not, whether we're willing or unwilling, we can't change this fact. In truth, starting from yesterday's battle, we've already fallen into his rhythm. Huashu Wuzong's face was fraught with worry. If the sneak attack from before was still a conspiracy, then now, it had become a secret plot. A conspiracy, an open plot. Dalawan Ruozan was correct. Wang Chong had intentionally left behind the wolf's skin to have them discover him. Not only that, everything that was happening now was exactly what he wanted to see, but to his dismay, even though he understood his opponent's intentions, not only was he unable to mount an effective counterattack, he was even more restrained. This was a psychological attack, as well as another kind of overt plot. No, this battle hasn't fallen into his rhythm, nor is it up to him to decide. Dalawan Ruozan suddenly said. Huashu Wuzong, has Abu Sangji still not returned? No. Huashu Wuzong shook his head. It had been a long time since Abu Sangji's raiding party had set out, and they had been completely routed by the Tang people. Even though they had sent many soldiers, very few had returned, and Abu Sangji himself was nowhere to be found. Some said that he had returned long ago, others said that he had been killed by the Tang people. In short, the entire army was in a state of confusion, but Dalawan Ruozan still had a sliver of hope in Abu Sangji, hoping that he would be able to wait for his return. It seems like Abu Sangji really is dead. A hint of sorrow appeared in Dalawan Ruozan's eyes. Abu Sangji was a valiant general of the Yarlung royal lineage. Abu Sangji had followed him closely from the royal capital's prison and provided him with much assistance. Quite a few of the Yarlung royal lineage soldiers in the expedition to Talas had been sent by Abu Sangji. Abu Sangji's assistance was far greater than anyone else's, and Dalawan Ruozan viewed him as his right-hand man. Deep within his heart, Dalawan Ruozan truly did not want to believe that Abu Sangji had died in battle. But the facts were right before his eyes. Abu Sangji's fate truly did not bode well. Have the scouts that were sent to investigate returned? What's the news? Dalawan Ruozan asked. I was just about to tell you about this matter. The soldiers sent to confirm the situation have returned. Based on what they found, although Abu Sangji's men were defeated, they truly accomplished their objective. Behind the second defense line of the city of Talas, there are fragments and parts of the Tang dynasty ballistae everywhere. From the looks of it, there should really be 400 to 500 of them. Those soldiers who managed to escape weren't lying. If we didn't count Abu Sangji's death, this operation could truly be considered a great success. Huashu Wuzong solemnly said. Very good. Dalawan Ruozan's creased brow finally relaxed. This could be said to be the best news he had heard all day. Although Abu Sangji had died in battle, he had still succeeded in his mission. The destruction of 500 Tang dynasty ballistae was a significant blow to the Tang dynasty army, which only had 2,000 some ballistae. In any case, Dalawan Ruozen's strategic mission had been accomplished. 500 ballistae have been destroyed. This mission has been completed, so Abu Sangji's death wasn't in vain. This battle is far from over. Dalawan Ruozen gazed at the distant city of Talas, a harsh light in his eyes. In the darkness, the Tang dynasty and the Uzun were not the only ones surging with undercurrents. To the far west, the Arab camp was also bustling with activity. Rahman, has the news arrived? In the tent, Abu Muslim gazed at the black-armored and thin Arab commander in front of him, his face covered in a thick beard. Lord Governor, the news has arrived. When General Nerman attacked the Tang dynasty defense line, we succeeded in breaking through the Tang army's defenses and secretly got in touch with the Karluks in the city without attracting the Anshi Protectorate army's attention. Rahman lowered his head and bowed. Rahman was Abu Muslim's trusted aide and deputy. He didn't have many soldiers under his command, so he didn't seem to be very valued. But very few people knew that at Abu Muslim's side, Rahman was actually much more valued than many of the Arab generals. In this night raid, many people believed that Nerman and his Deathwing team were the true attacking force, but very few people knew that Rahman and his several dozen infiltrators were the true force. I understand. You may leave. A satisfied light flashed in Abu Muslim's eyes as he waved his hand. Rahman bowed and quickly left. Governor, can the Karluks really be trusted? Once Rahman had left, Ziad, the Arab deputy governor of the East, walked out from the rear and asked. In truth, the two of them did not care much about how many Tang people had been killed in this night raid. What the two of them truly cared about was the Karluk tribe hidden in Talas, that had not received much attention. The treasures of the Arabs have never been so easy to take. Since the Karluks have accepted our gifts, whether they are trustworthy or not, since they have agreed, they must do it. Abu Muslim gazed at the distant darkness, at the towering behemoth of Talas amidst the flames, and a chilling light flashed through his eyes. On this continent, no one had ever gone back on their word after making a contract with the Arabs. All those who went back on their word would eventually pay the most grievous price. Chapter 949. But there's another matter. That new Tang dynasty commander seems to have had a little conflict with Wan Hapeluo. Moreover, the Karluks still haven't opened the gates of Talas as promised. If we don't resolve these two matters, the Karluks won't be able to trust us. A moment later, Ziad suddenly said, the battlefield was too far away, and the more than 100,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty were in the middle. Even Abu Muslim and Ziad only knew that a conflict had taken place at the mouth of the distant city of Talas, but they didn't know the specifics. They can't be trusted. When the time comes, we'll kill them all. Abu Muslim waved his hand, his expression cold and callous. That's right. When will the two armies His Majesty spoke of arrive? I've already sent a letter. They're on their way and not far from here. They should arrive at sunrise. Ziad said. Very good. Perhaps we won't even need the Karluks. Once those two armies arrive, we can completely destroy the Tang dynasty and the city of Talas. Abu Muslim's eyes shone so brightly that not even the darkness could conceal them. Slowly, everything calmed down, but a hidden danger continued to intensify in the air. Boom! With a loud yak horn, dawn broke in the east and thousands of scarlet rays of sunlight burst over the horizon. A few moments later, the rising sun dispelled the darkness and illuminated the scarred and majestic city of Talas, as well as the camps of the Uzun and the Western Turks. With the sound of the horn, tens of thousands of Uzun soldiers surged out of their tents and gathered into ranks, their horses valiant and spirited, brimming with the will to fight. All the scars of last night's battle were covered by the sunlight, and the entire Uzun army was once more brimming with killing intent. In the distance between the two steel defense lines in front of the city of Talas, countless Tang dynasty soldiers were mobilizing behind the steel walls, assuming a defensive stance. The killing intent and aura of war that had been concealed by the darkness once more filled the air with the arrival of dawn. Dong 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 dong. Dense sounds of war drums resounded throughout the entire city of Talis. The city gates opened and countless soldiers poured out. Between the two lines of defense, there were infantry, archers, ballistae, axemen, cavalry. All the different types of troops were clearly separated and lined up at the back. Screech! Just when the atmosphere on the battlefield gradually became tense, a long arrow pierced through the air, flying from the direction of the Uzun campsite to the sky above the city of Talis. The ear-piercing whistle could be heard clearly even from more than 10 miles away. Wang Chong, do you dare to come out and meet me? A loud voice suddenly came from the Uzun camp. The voice was loud and clear, and it was hard to believe that it was the voice of an Uzun. 3 figures rode out of the Uzun camp in a cloud of dust, galloping toward the city of Talis. Around 1,000 zhang from the city of Talis, Dalawan Ruozhen stopped, his head raised as he silently waited. His eyes narrowed, as if he was waiting for something. Even though the atmosphere between the two defense lines was getting more and more tense, the entire Tang dynasty camp was quiet, deathly still, with no response. After some time, just when Huishu Huaitsong and Dusong Mangpoj were beginning to grow impatient, a young voice came from the distance, exuding a powerful aura. Dalawan Ruozhen, I trust you've been well since we last met. With an excited neigh, a pure white warhorse carrying a young figure appeared in the northeast corner of the city of Talis. Wang Chong. Dalawan Ruozhen narrowed his eyes and turned his head. He had not expected Wang Chong to appear in this place. But Dalawan Ruozhen quickly smiled. After not seeing each other for half a year, I didn't think that Lord Protector General's art of war would get even better. I've only heard of beasts learning from men, but never of men learning from beasts. Lord Protector General has truly broadened my horizons. As Dalawan Ruozhen spoke, he even clasped his hands, an expression of sincere admiration on his face. Haha, no matter how brilliant you are, how can you compare to Prime Minister? You clearly knew that I was prepared. But you still sent more than 3,000 people to collide with my blade. Wang Chong heartily laughed. In a flash, Dalawan Ruozhen, Huishu Huaitsong, and Dusong Mangpoj all turned gloomy. Wang Chong was clearly mocking the fact that the raiding party they had sent last night had been stopped by Wang Chong and suffered grievous losses. They had both sent soldiers to ambush and disguised themselves as the enemy. But in this contest, Dalawan Ruozhen had completely lost. But Dalawan Ruozhen quickly regained his composure. Victory and defeat are commonplace for a soldier. Uzun can still afford to lose, but the young Marquis is different. Without 500 ballistae, I hope that the young Marquis can still smile in this battle. Dalawan Ruozhen faintly smiled, his movements calm and composed, exuding an aura that even Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Ha ha ha! Standing atop the walls of Talis, Wang Chong couldn't help but laugh at these words. The superior faction attacked schemes while the inferior faction attacked soldiers. Attacking the heart was superior to attacking the city. The moment Dalawan Ruozhen said these words, Wang Chong understood why he had come. There is no need for Prime Minister to worry about this. The Tang dynasty has many treasures, let alone a trifling 500 ballistae. Even if they had more ballistae, it would only take a few moments for them to build. Wang Chong looked into the distance, his right hand swinging down. Chinbin. Rumble. Wang Chong's voice was like a signal, and in the light of the morning sun, the gates of the city of Talis opened. As Dalawan Ruozhen, Huishu Huaitsong, and Dusong Mangpoj watched, massive ballistae loaded onto transport carriages streamed out of the city of Talis. Under the command of their leader, Chun Bin, the well-trained ballistae moved with incredible speed to the gaps in the second defense line. From a distance, one could see that there were nearly 500 ballistae, no more no less. Last night, the Tang dynasty had lost 500 ballistae, leaving only around 2,500 on the two defense lines. But now Wang Chong had produced another 500. Release! With Chun Bin's order, the 500 ballistae adjusted their direction, raised their ballistae into the air, and fired. Boom boom boom. There was a heaven-shaking boom, as the 500 ballista bolts shot into the heavens. A few moments later, 500 thick ballista bolts descended from the heavens, piercing through the air, as they plunged into the battlefield 5 to 600 zhang above the city of steel. Buzz! At this sight, Daluan Ruozhen, Huashu Wuzong, and Dusong Mangpoj, the minister and two generals of the Uzan Empire, felt like they had been slapped in the face, their faces contorted into unsightly grimaces. What's going on here? The scouts reported that weren't 500 ballistae destroyed? Why do they still have so many ballistae? How could there be such a thing? The scouts couldn't have made such a mistake. Even Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Wuzong were dumbfounded. The scouts they had dispatched last night had confirmed time and time again that Abu Sangji's forces had truly destroyed nearly 500 Tang dynasty ballistae. There was no mistake about this. The scouts of the Uzan Empire might not be as elite as those of the Tang dynasty, but they would never make such a mistake on such a basic matter. We've been tricked again. Abu Sangji's attacks probably weren't even real ballistae. Daluan Ruozhen took in a deep breath, his mind in turmoil. But how could this be? Can Abu Sangji not even tell the difference between ballistae? Huashu Wuzong said in disbelief. Abu Sangji was a valiant general of the Yarlung royal faction. He was extremely experienced and wouldn't make such a childish mistake. If he hadn't confirmed it multiple times, he wouldn't have moved out so easily. I don't know what's going on either, but there's no doubt that Abu Sangji has fallen for their trap. The specific structure of the Tang dynasty ballistae has always been a secret. Not many Tang people know about it, let alone us. At most, Abu Sangji can only tell the shape of the ballistae. If my guess is correct, that fellow must have done something to them. Daluan Ruozhen said, as he gazed at the white horse atop the distant city of Talas, and that young figure. Daluan Ruozhen's heart was filled with complex emotions. A general was the leader of an army, and the soul of an army. If there was the slightest flaw in their every move, or if there was even the slightest flaw in their mind, the army could suffer a devastating blow. This was the true reason Daluan Ruozhen had met with Wang Chong. If he could reveal a flaw in Wang Chong's mind, and strike a blow to his confidence, the entire Great Tang army would be affected. But there was no question that Wang Chong had won this round. With this person in the Tang dynasty, our Uzan won't be able to live in peace for the next 40 years. Daluan Ruozhen gave a deep sigh, an indescribable feeling welling up in his heart. In the Uzan Empire, Daluan Ruozhen's intelligence was practically unparalleled on the plateau. Other than the Tsempo's imperial minister, Dalan Trinling, no one else could compare to him. But Daluan Ruozhen just had to run into Wang Chong, an opponent who surpassed him in both intelligence and strategy. Daluan Ruozhen couldn't help but recall a book from the Central Plains that he had once read. Since he was born, how could Liang be born? Daluan Ruozhen gave a deep sigh, unable to speak. In the distance, atop the high city of Talas, Wang Chong rode on his snow-white warhorse, silently smiling at the trio below. A psychological attack. For Daluan Ruozhen to flaunt the art of war of the Central Plains in front of the war saint of the Central Plains was nothing more than a display of slight skill before an expert. Prime Minister, the culture of the Central Plains is vast and profound. I hear that Prime Minister is fond of collecting the various classics and histories of the Central Plains, books on war and strategy. Once this battle is over, Wang Chong will give Prime Minister another 1,000 books. Read it 100 times, and the meaning will naturally become apparent. Prime Minister still needs to read more. Wang Chong placed particular emphasis on these last words, and then he roared with laughter. Prime Minister, Wang Chong is busy with military affairs, so I won't keep you company. We'll meet again on the battlefield. In the Nei, Wang Chong pulled on the reins, turned his horse around, and rode off on his snow-white warhorse. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.